For more than 1,000 years, Constantinople stood as the greatest fortified city on earth. Founded in 330 AD by Emperor Constantine the Great, it was the eastern heart of the Roman Empire, later known as the Byzantine Empire. Its massive walls, towering churches, and strategic position between Europe and Asia made it both a prize and a symbol. Many had tried to conquer it. Persians, Arabs, Rus, Bulgars, and Crusaders all came and failed, or, in the case of the Fourth Crusade, damaged it but did not truly replace its legacy. By the mid-15th century, however, the city was no longer the imperial giant it once had been. It was a fading jewel surrounded by enemies, defended by faith, memory, and walls built for an earlier age. By 1453, the Byzantine Empire had shrunk to little more than Constantinople itself and a few scattered territories. Its population was a fraction of what it once had been. Inside the city, abandoned buildings and empty districts told the story of long decline. Yet the walls of Constantinople, especially the Theodosian Walls, were still the strongest fortifications in the world. 3 lines deep in places, reinforced by towers and moats, they had protected the city for centuries. The Byzantines believed these walls were blessed by God. Many thought the city was divinely protected and could never truly fall. Across the Bosporus, a new power was rising. The Ottoman Turks, once nomadic warriors from Central Asia, had built a disciplined and ambitious empire. In 1451, a young sultan came to the throne, Mehmed II. He was only 19 years old, but he was intelligent, determined, and obsessed with one goal: capturing Constantinople. To him, the city was not only strategically vital, but symbolically essential. Whoever controlled Constantinople controlled the gateway between East and West. Mehmed believed it was his destiny to take the city and make it the capital of a new empire. Mehmed prepared carefully. He ordered the construction of a massive fortress, Rumeli Hisari, on the European side of the Bosporus, directly opposite an older Ottoman fort. This allowed him to control naval traffic and cut Constantinople off from aid by sea. Even more importantly, he invested heavily in new technology, gunpowder artillery. A Hungarian engineer named Urban built enormous cannons for the Ottomans, some so large they required dozens of oxen to move. These cannons could fire stone balls weighing hundreds of kilograms, something the ancient walls had never been designed to withstand. Inside Constantinople, Emperor Constantine the Palaiologos faced impossible choices. He had limited troops, perhaps 7,000 to 8,000 defenders in total, including foreign mercenaries. Among them were several thousand Genoese soldiers led by Giovanni Giustiniani, a skilled commander. The emperor appealed to Western Europe for help, but assistance was minimal. Political divisions, religious tensions between Catholic and Orthodox Christians, and years of war elsewhere meant that Constantinople stood largely alone. On April 6, 1453, the siege began. Ottoman forces, possibly numbering over 80,000 men, surrounded the city. Their cannons began pounding the walls day after day. The noise was terrifying, an unfamiliar, thunderous sound that shook the ground and the confidence of the defenders. Though the walls were thick, repeated bombardment caused cracks and collapses. Each night, Byzantine and Genoese defenders rushed to repair the damage with earth, stones, and wooden supports. The Ottomans attacked not only by land, but also by sea. The Byzantines blocked the Golden Horn harbour with a massive iron chain, preventing enemy ships from entering. In a bold and ingenious move, Mehmed ordered dozens of ships to be dragged overland on grease logs and launched into the Golden Horn behind the chain. This shocked the defenders and stretched their already limited forces even thinner. Constantinople was now under pressure from almost every direction as the siege dragged on. Morale inside the city weakened. Food supplies dwindled. Churches filled with prayer and desperate processions. Many believed ancient prophecies that Constantinople would fall. then be miraculously reclaimed by a Christian ruler at the last moment. Emperor Constantine the Theodosian remained calm and visible, encouraging his soldiers and sharing in their danger. He refused offers to escape, insisting he would die with his city. In late May, Mehmed prepared for a final all-out assault. On the night of May 28, 1453, Constantinople was eerily quiet. Inside the city, a final religious service was held in the Hagia Sophia. Catholics and Orthodox worshipped together, setting aside centuries of division in the face of extinction. Outside the walls, Ottoman soldiers prepared for battle, chanting prayers and sharpening weapons. Before dawn on May 29th, the final attack began. Waves of Ottoman troops surged toward the walls. The first attackers were irregular soldiers, sent to exhaust the defenders. They were followed by better trained forces. Finally came the elite janissaries, disciplined infantry armed with firearms and supported by cannon fire. During the fighting, Giovanni Giustiniani was badly wounded and carried away. His departure caused panic among some defenders. At a critical moment, a small gate, possibly the Kirche Porta, was left open or breached. Ottoman soldiers poured into the city. Emperor Constantine V was last seen fighting near the walls. He removed his imperial insignia and disappeared into the chaos. His body was never clearly identified, but history remembers him as the last Roman emperor, dying as a soldier among his men. By morning, Constantinople had fallen. Ottoman troops flooded the streets. As was customary at the time, the city was subjected to looting for a limited period. Many citizens fled to the Hagia Sophia, believing it to be a place of sanctuary. Soon, Ottoman soldiers entered the great church. According to tradition, Mehmed II arrived later that day. He ordered the looting to stop and declared the city his new capital. The Hagia Sophia was converted into a mosque, but much of the city's infrastructure and population were preserved. Mehmed understood that Constantinople was more valuable alive than destroyed. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 marked far more than the end of a city. It marked the definitive end of the Byzantine Empire, the last continuation of the Roman world. It also symbolized the close of the Middle Ages. Gunpowder artillery had defeated medieval walls. Feudal armies were giving way to centralized, technologically advanced states. Scholars fleeing the fallen city carried ancient Greek and Roman texts into Western Europe, helping fuel the Renaissance. Constantinople became Istanbul, the shining capital of the Ottoman Empire, which would dominate much of Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa for centuries. The world had shifted. An ancient era ended and a new one began. Not with a quiet transition, but with fire, thunder, and the fall of the greatest city the medieval world had ever known. Close your eyes. Let the heavy curtain of the present day fall away. Take a slow, deep breath and let it out. Imagine the air changing around you. It is no longer the recycled air of a modern room, but the crisp, salty breeze of the Bosporus in early spring, the scent of ancient stone, damp earth, and the faint, sweet smoke of incense drifting from 1,000 churches fills your nose. The light is soft, a golden twilight bathing the 7 hills of the city in a melancholy amber glow. You are safe here, a ghost drifting through time, unseen and unheard. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your city in local time in the comments so we can see where everyone is listening from. End of part 1. We float now, hovering above the Golden Horn in the weeks before the end. It is April 1453. Below us lies the Queen of Cities, Constantinople. From this height she looks like a jagged triangle of stone jutting into the cold blue sea, defiant against the vastness of the water. But look closer, the great urban sprawl that once housed 500,000 souls. The The bustling metropolis where Roman senators once argued in Latin and Greek merchants shouted in the forums is quiet. Historians often debate the exact population of the city in these final days, with estimates ranging from a tragic 40,000 to perhaps 50,000 people. It is a city of ghosts, even before the death arrives. We drift over vast stretches of green within the walls, orchards, vegetable gardens, and fields of wheat growing where marble palaces once stood. Nature is slowly reclaiming the capital of the Romans. Vines creep up the aqueducts, and goats graze in the fractured courtyards of abandoned monasteries, caring nothing for the imperial history beneath their hooves. The silence is profound, broken only by the rhythmic lapping of the waves against the sea walls and the distant chanting of monks. The city feels less like a fortress and more like a vast, open-air cathedral, waiting for a service that will never end. The people who remain are not just citizens, they are the keepers of a flame that is flickering in the wind. They walk the cobbled streets with their heads down, their robes patched, living in the shadows of monuments built by giants. Every stone here has a story, every cracked column a memory of a Caesar or a saint. Yet, despite the decay, there is a breathtaking beauty to the city of world's desire. The dome of the Hagia Sophia rises above the horizon like a second sun, its gold mosaics catching the fading light. It stands as a reminder of what this place represents: the center of the world, the eye of the universe. To the defenders on the walls, looking out at the gathering darkness, it is inconceivable that this could end. Rome is eternal, isn't it? But the wind blowing from the east carries the sound of drums, a low, rhythmic heartbeat that is getting closer and closer. We must drift lower now, descending from the clouds to walk the ancient, uneven stones of the Mese, the middle street, the great arterial road that runs through the heart of the city. To understand the fall, one must first understand the silence. In the height of the medieval afternoon, where one might expect the clamour of merchants and the shouting of guards, there is instead a stillness that feels heavy, like a held breath. The city has become a shell, a magnificent, hollowed-out pearl. Once this street was lined with colonnades and shops that sold silk from China and spices from India, protected by the golden icon of Christ. Now the marble columns are cracked, their bases hidden by tall, swaying grass. The great forums where emperors were once proclaimed have become quiet pastures. You might see a goat standing atop a fallen Corinthian capital, chewing thoughtfully on a vine, the only emperor left in this particular ruin. It is a gentle, almost comical image, the grandeur of Rome reduced to a grazing ground, but it carries a profound melancholy. This is the reality of Constantinople in 1453. It is no longer truly a city in the modern sense, but a collection of distinct, walled villages separated by orchards and ruins, all huddled together inside the massive outer fortifications. The population has collapsed. The Black Death, the Crusader sack of 1204, and centuries of slow economic strangulation have done their work. The inhabitants do not live in a bustling metropolis. They live in a vast open-air museum of their own ancestors. Imagine living in a house built for giants, surrounded by monuments you no longer have the money to repair or the soldiers to man. It creates a specific kind of psychological weight, a cultural depression. The people here know they are the embers of a dying fire, yet despite this decay, there is a fierce, almost stubborn pride in the eyes of the few who remain. We must be careful with our words here, for if you were to stop a man on the street, perhaps a merchant selling dried fish, or a monk in a threadbare black robe, and call him a Byzantine, he would stare at you in confusion. Byzantine is a term invented by historians centuries later, a label for the dead. These people call themselves Romaioi, Romans. In their minds, this is not a Greek kingdom. This is the Roman Empire, unbroken and continuous from the time of Augustus. The emperor sitting in the Blachinae Palace is not a successor to the Romans. He is the Roman emperor. This belief is the glue holding the crumbling stones together. They are the last torchbearers of civilization in a world they see as increasingly barbaric, but the torch is flickering. The imperial treasury, once the envy of the known world, is empty. It is a historical irony that while the churches are still rich in spiritual gold, icons, relics, and incense, the actual gold is long gone. At the coronation of the previous emperor, observers noted something heartbreaking. The crown jewels were no longer real. The rubies and emeralds that glittered on the imperial diadem were actually coloured glass, and the plates used at the banquet were made of pewter and clay, not silver. The empire had become a theatre production where the actors were forced to wear costume jewellery, maintaining the pageantry of power even as the power itself had evaporated. It is a poignant image, the ruler of the Romans wearing glass jewels, praying for a miracle in a church that is slowly sinking into the dust. There is also a deep, fracturing silence within the soul of the city, a spiritual wound that refuses to heal. We drift through the narrow alleys toward the churches, and we hear the murmurs of an argument that has lasted for centuries. The city is divided not just by walls, but by faith. For decades, the emperors have sought aid from the Catholic West, from the Pope in Rome. In exchange for soldiers and ships to fight the Turks, the Pope demanded the union of the churches, the submission of the Orthodox Church to Catholic authority. Emperor Constantine the a pragmatist and a soldier, supports the union. He knows that without Western cannons and ships, the city will die. But the people? The monks? The nuns? The dock workers? They despise the idea. They remember the Fourth Crusade of 1204, when Western knights, fellow Christians, sacked Constantinople, desecrating the altars and stealing the relics. To the average citizen, the Latins, the Catholics, are as much an enemy as the Ottomans. Walking past a tavern near the harbour, you might hear the bitter, famous declaration attributed to the Grand Duke Lucas Notaras: "I would rather see the Turkish turban in the midst of the city than the Latin mitre." Historians still argue about whether Notaras actually said this in those exact words, or if it was later propaganda, but the sentiment is undeniably real. The city is tearing itself apart from the inside. In the Hagia Sophia, the greatest cathedral in Christendom, many Orthodox priests refuse to hold liturgy because they consider the emperor a heretic for dealing with the Pope. Imagine the loneliness of Constantine V. He is fighting to save a people who believe his method of saving them will damn their souls. He walks a razor's edge, trying to reconcile the political need for Western iron with the spiritual stubbornness of Eastern faith. As the sun begins to set, casting long violet shadows across the Golden Horn, the atmosphere shifts from melancholy to a quiet, creeping dread. The decline is not just visible in the stones. It is felt in the air. The empire has shrunk until it is essentially just this city and a few isolated holdings in Greece. It is a head without a body. The wheat fields inside the walls can feed the people for a while, and the cisterns, vast underground lakes held up by forests of stone columns, are full of fresh water, but a city cannot survive on water and memory alone. We move now toward the northern corner of the city, to the Palace of the Blachinae. This is where the emperor lives, having abandoned the sprawling, ruinous great palace near the sea. The Blachinae is a fortress within a fortress, built into the land walls. It is more defensible, more practical, but less grand. Here, the wind whistles through the arrow slits, and the court is small, intimate, and sombre. There are no great feasts, no dancing girls, no foreign dignitaries bearing gifts of ivory and peacocks. There are only tired men in rusty mail, studying maps that show a sea of Ottoman territory surrounding their tiny island of stone. It is here that we begin to feel the inevitability of what is coming. The decline of Constantinople was not a sudden cliff, but a long, slow slide down a gentle slope, barely noticeable day by day, until you reach the bottom and look up to see how far you have fallen. For the grandfather of a man living in 1453, the empire was weak. For his father, it was weaker. And for him, it is almost gone. There is a specific kind of sadness in being the generation that sees the end. To be the one holding the candle when the wick finally runs out. And yet, the beauty remains. As night falls, the lamps are lit in the windows of the wooden houses. The smell of roasting fish and baking bread rises into the cool air, a comforting domestic scent that defies the history books. Children still play with rag dolls in the shadows of the aqueducts. Lovers still meet in the overgrown gardens of forgotten aristocracy. Life continues, stubborn and soft, against the backdrop of doom. They do not know the exact date the end will come. They only know that the world is old. The walls are cracked and the horizon is dark. But for tonight, the walls still stand. For tonight, the city is still Roman, and in the silence of the falling night, we can almost hear the heartbeat of the last emperor, steady and calm, preparing for a destiny he did not choose, but will not run from. Leave the crumbling stones of Constantinople behind for a moment, and let your spirit drift northward and westward, gliding over the dark, rolling plains of Thrace. We travel only 150 miles, but we cross into a different world, a world not of twilight, but of a fierce rising dawn. We arrive at the palace in Edirne, the capital of the Ottoman Empire. It is late, deep in the velvet quiet of the night, long past the hour when reasonable men have blown out their candles, but in one room a light still burns. It casts long, flickering shadows against walls, hung with silk tapestries and painted with geometric beauty. Inside this room sits a young man, hunched over a sprawling table covered in parchment. He is 19 years old, perhaps 20. His face is striking, dominated by a prominent arch nose that historians and painters will later emphasize as a mark of his relentless will, and his eyes are dark, burning with an intelligence that unsettles those who look into them for too long. This is Mehmed II, the man the world will soon call the Conqueror, but tonight he is just a boy awake while his empire sleeps, tracing lines on a map with a piece of charcoal. To understand the fall of the city, we must understand the soul of the man who rose to take it. Western history has often painted Mehmed as a barbarian at the gates, a bloodthirsty tyrant obsessed with destruction. But the truth, whispered in the rustle of the scrolls on his table, is far more complex and far more fascinating. Mehmed is a scholar. He is a Renaissance prince before the Renaissance has even truly begun. He speaks not just Turkish, but fluent Greek, Arabic, Latin, Persian, and Hebrew. While the emperor in Constantinople prays to the Virgin Mary, Mehmed reads the biographies of Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar in their original languages. He does not want to destroy Rome. He wants to be Rome. He sees himself not as the enemy of the Caesars, but as their legitimate successor. In his mind, the Roman Empire has not failed. It has merely been waiting for a ruler strong enough to wear its crown. There is a specific kind of loneliness in being a prodigy, a distance that separates him from his own court. He is surrounded by advisors who see the world as it is, while he is cursed or blessed to see the world as it could be. The room smells of wax and old paper. The only sound is the scratching of his charcoal as he draws the contours of the golden horn again and again. He knows the shape of the city better than he knows the lines of his own palm. He studies the currents of the Bosporus, the depth of the moat, the height of the towers. It is an obsession that borders on madness. Legends say that during these months, Mehmed is an insomniac, prowling the corridors of his palace like a restless ghost. If he does sleep, he dreams of the city. When he wakes, he demands to speak of it. It is said, perhaps with a touch of myth, that if you were to open his pillow, you would find sketches of siege engines stuffed inside the feathers. It is a charming image, a teenager hugging his blueprints like a security blanket, dreaming of changing the world. But his path is not clear. In the shadows of the palace, there are whispers of doubt. Mehmed has been sultan once before, briefly, as a child when his father abdicated, only to be pushed aside when a crisis arose. He has a chip on his shoulder, the size of a mountain. He feels the eyes of the old guard on him, specifically the Grand Vizier, Halil Pasha. We can imagine Halil Pasha as the voice of caution, an old, wealthy, and powerful statesman who believes that peace with Byzantium is better for business. Halil looks at this young, intense sultan and sees a dangerous gamble. He calls Mehmed's dream folly. He urges patience, but patience is a language Mehmed does not speak. The tension between the old vizier and the young sultan is the friction that sparks the fire. Every time Halil says impossible, Mehmed hears inevitable. There is a deep driving psychological need here. Mehmed knows that as long as Constantinople stands as a Christian enclave in the middle of his Islamic empire, his realm is incomplete. It is a bone in the throat of Allah's wolf. More than that, there is the prophecy. A famous hadith attributed to the Prophet Muhammad says, "Verily, you shall conquer Constantinople." What a wonderful leader will he be? And what a wonderful army will that army be? This prophecy hangs over Mehmed's head like a halo and a sword. He wants to be that leader. He wants to be the red apple, the Kazal Elma, the ultimate goal of Turkish longing. It is not just about territory, it is about destiny. He feels the weight of history pressing on his shoulders, urging him to finish what his ancestors started. Let us watch him for a moment in the silence of his study. He pushes the map away and walks to the window. The night air of Edirne is cool and sweet, smelling of cypress and damp grass. He looks east. He cannot see the city from here, but he can feel it. He imagines the great dome of Hagia Sophia waiting for him. It is a romance of sorts, a dark and heavy courtship between a king and a city. He respects the Emperor Constantine. He knows him to be a brave man. But Mehmed believes that bravery is not enough against the turning of the tide. He believes he is the instrument of time itself. It is interesting to note that historians still debate the true nature of Mehmed's religious zeal. Was he a devout, pious warrior driven solely by faith? Or was he a secular imperialist using religion as a tool, a man who famously commissioned Italian artists to paint his portrait, something strictly forbidden by conservative Islamic tradition? The truth is likely a blend of both, woven together in the complex tapestry of his mind. He is a man of contradictions, a poet who writes delicate verses about gardening, and a general who orders the construction of machines that can smash walls to dust. He is capable of great cruelty and profound sophistication. He is the storm that is gathering while Constantinople prays for rain. As the dawn begins to grey the sky outside his window, the call to prayer rises from the minarets of Edirne. Allahu Akbar. God is great. The sound drifts through the open window, mixing with the birdsong of the morning. Mehmed turns back to his table. his decision is made. The waiting is over. He will not be the Sultan who rules in the shadow of Rome. He will be the Sultan who sits upon its throne. He picks up his quill, dips it in ink, and begins to write the orders that will move the world. He orders the mines to be emptied of copper and tin. He orders the forests to be felled for timber. He orders the ox carts to be gathered. The boy is gone. The conqueror has arrived, and though the city across the water does not yet know it, the first stone of its walls has already fallen, right here in this quiet room, pushed over by the hand of a young man who refused to sleep. The dream is ending. The reality is about to begin. The map on the table is no longer a drawing. It is a battle plan. Leave the planning table of the young wolf in Edian and let the wind carry us back across the miles, over the Sea of Marmara to the ramparts of the Old Lion. It is a grey, blustery morning in Constantinople, the kind of day where the mist clings to the wool of your cloak and the dampness settles deep in your bones. High atop the Theodosian Walls, a solitary figure walks against the wind. He is a man of 49 years, though the deep lines etched around his eyes and the grey streaking his beard make him appear older. He wears the purple boots of the Roman Emperor, the Campagia, embroidered with gold eagles that seem to struggle against the mud splattered on the leather. This is Constantine Definition Dragash Palaiologos. He is not a man of grand speeches or flamboyant gestures. He is a man of quiet, crushing duty. If Mehmed is the fire, Constantine is the stone, weathered, cracked, but still standing. He walks with a slight limp, the legacy of a life spent in the saddle and on the battlefield. For unlike many of his predecessors who ruled from silk couches, Constantine is a soldier. He prefers the smell of horse sweat and iron to the perfume of the court, which is fortunate, because by now the court has run out of perfume anyway. As he paces the battlements, inspecting the crumbling mortar and the moss growing in the cracks of history, we can sense the profound loneliness that surrounds him. He is a widower twice over. Both of his wives died young, leaving him with no heir, no son to inherit this kingdom of ruins. In a way, the city itself has become his spouse, his child, and his widow, all at once. He runs a gloved hand over the rough limestone of a merlon. These walls are legendary. Built by Theodosius II in the 5th century, they are a triple-layered miracle of engineering, a moat, a low outer wall, and this massive inner wall, towering 40 feet into the air. For 1,000 years, they have broken the waves of barbarian invasions. Attila the Hun turned away from them. The Avars, the Arabs, the Bulgars, all crashed against these stones and receded like the tide. But Constantine knows a secret that keeps him awake at night. The walls were built to stop arrows and catapults. They were not built to stop the thunder that Mehmed is forging in Edirne. The emperor stops at a section of the wall that feels particularly fragile, perhaps kicking a loose pebble that tumbles down into the empty moat below. It is a small human moment, a homeowner worrying about the roof. Only the roof is the last shield of Western civilization. There is a haunting historical poetry to his presence here, a coincidence so perfect it feels like the work of a novelist rather than fate. The very first Christian Roman emperor was Constantine the Great, and his mother was named Helena. This man, the very last emperor, is also Constantine, and his mother was also named Helena. The circle is closing. The Alpha and the Omega. He is aware of this. He is a man of education and deep piety, and he surely feels the heavy, rhythmic symmetry of time pressing down on his chest. It is said that he carries a small icon of the Virgin Mary in his tunic, a private comfort in a world of public desperate measures. But he is also a pragmatist. He knows that prayers must be supported by pikes. We follow him as he descends a narrow stone staircase into the city, his guards trailing a respectful distance behind. He visits the granaries. They are half empty. He visits the treasury. It is an echo chamber. He meets with his commanders, a motley collection of Greeks, Venetians, and Genoese. It is here that we see the true nobility of the man. He could have fled. There were ships. There were offers of asylum in the Peloponnese, where he could have lived out his days in a sunny villa, eating olives and writing memoirs. But he stayed. He chose to be the captain who goes down with the ship, not out of a death wish, but out of a profound sense of identity. He is the emperor. Without the city, he is nothing. The title Emperor of the Romans is not a job description to him. It is a sacrament. Historians often debate the legitimacy of his title, a dry academic argument that feels almost cruel given his sacrifice. Technically, Constantine was never officially crowned in the Hagia Sophia by the Patriarch, as tradition demanded. He was proclaimed emperor in Mistras, a provincial capital, and the ceremony was a quick civil affair. Because of the religious schism and the chaos of the times, the formal religious coronation in the capital never happened. So, in the eyes of some purists, he is the uncrowned king, a regent until the end. But watch him now, stopping to speak to a baker who is mixing sawdust into the flour to make the bread stretch further. Constantine touches the man's shoulder, offering a word of thanks, his voice low and steady. The baker looks at him with tears in his eyes. To his people he is no regent. He is the basileus. He is the father of the city. Formal crowns of gold matter little when you are wearing a crown of thorns. There is a touch of soft humour in the tragedy, if one looks closely. The imperial bureaucracy, an ancient and lumbering beast, still tries to function even at the apocalypse. Scribes still insist on triplicate forms for arrow requisitions. Court officials still argue over the proper order of precedence in processions, bickering about who stands to the left or right of the emperor, while the Ottoman army is literally marching to kill them all. Constantine tolerates this with a weary patience. He understands that these rituals are a comfort, a way for people to pretend that the world is still orderly. He nods at the pompous courtier, complaining about a draft in the palace, listening gravely as if fixing a window is the most important matter of state, while mentally calculating how much lead can be stripped from the church roofs to make bullets. It is the patience of a saint, or perhaps just a man who knows that soon none of this will matter. As the afternoon light begins to fail, turning the golden horn into a sheet of hammered copper, Constantine returns to the Blachernay Palace. He stands on a balcony looking north. In the distance, across the water, he can see the activity on the European shore. He can see the dust rising. He knows the Ottomans are building something there, choking off the strait. The noose is tightening. He grips the cold iron railing of the balcony until his knuckles turn white. He is not afraid of death. He is a soldier, and death is an old acquaintance. He is afraid of failure. He is afraid of being the man who lost Rome. The wind picks up, blowing his purple cloak around him, snapping the heavy fabric like a flag. He turns back into the dark room, where a single candle burns. He has letters to write, begging letters to the Pope, to Venice, to Genoa. "Come quickly," he writes, the ink staining his fingers. "We are the shield of Europe." But he knows, in the quiet chambers of his heart, that the shield is cracking. And yet, he dips the quill again. He will write until the ink runs dry. He will fight until the sword breaks. He will stand on the walls until the stones turn to dust. Tonight the emperor sleeps in his armour, for even in his dreams he is walking the ramparts, guarding the ghost of a glory that refuses to die. Shift your gaze now from the lonely figure on the palace balcony to the vibrant churning waters of the Bosporus Strait. We travel just a few miles north of the city to the narrowest point of this great waterway, a place where the continents of Europe and Asia lean in so close they seem to be whispering secrets to one another. Here, the currents are treacherous, swirling with the cold fury of the Black Sea, rushing down to meet the warmth of the Mediterranean. It is the throat of the world, and it is here, in the spring and summer of 1452, that the silence of the coast is shattered not by war, but by industry. If Constantinople is a city falling asleep, this patch of shoreline is violently, energetically awake. The air is thick with the dust of crushed limestone and the rhythmic clink, clink, clink of thousands of chisels striking stone. It is a symphony of construction that will change the map forever. Mehmed has not just come to watch. He has come to build. He has ordered the construction of a fortress on the European bank, directly across from an older fortress his grandfather built on the Asian side. The strategic brilliance is terrifyingly simple, with two castles flanking the narrowest point of the strait. The Ottomans can crossfire their cannons and stop any ship afloat. Nothing will pass from the Black Sea to Constantinople. No grain, no Genoese reinforcements, no hope, without the Sultan's permission. He calls this fortress RelaxingHistory, the fortress of the Romans, but the soldiers have a darker, more honest name for it, Boğazkesim. Depending on how you translate the Turkish, it means either straight cutter or, more ominously, throat cutter. The speed of the construction is a marvel that historians still marvel at today. In the medieval world, a castle of this magnitude, with walls 25 feet thick and towers rising nearly 100 feet high, would typically take years, perhaps a decade, to complete. Mehmed demands it be finished in 4 months. To achieve this impossible deadline, he assembles a workforce that rivals the pyramid builders of old. Over 6,000 workers, including master masons from all over the empire, lime burners, woodcutters, and thousands of labourers. The hillside looks like an overturned anthill. We can imagine the scene, the shouting of foremen, the creaking of ox carts groaning under the weight of marble columns scavenged from nearby ruins, and the smell of wet mortar and sweating men baking in the summer sun. There is a fascinating scholarly debate about the architectural design of the fortress. Viewed from the sky, or perhaps from the mind of a divine observer, the layout of the walls and the 3 main towers is said to form the Arabic characters for the name Muhammad, which is also the Sultan's name, Mehmed. Some historians argue this is a later legend, a romanticizing of topography, while others insist it was a deliberate, sacred signature written, in stone and iron. Whether intentional or not, the result is a fortress that feels alive, a jagged crown imposed on the green hillside. It is not just a military bunker, it is a declaration of ownership. Mehmed is writing his name on the land itself. The Sultan is not watching from a silk tent. He is down in the dust. Chroniclers tell us that Mehmed himself carried stones on his back, sweating alongside the humblest labourer to set an example. It is a terrifying motivator for the workforce. Imagine being a bricklayer, tired and thirsty, thinking about taking a nap in the shade of an olive tree, and then you look up to see the absolute ruler of the empire hauling a boulder past you. You would likely find a sudden, renewed burst of energy. It adds a touch of grim humour to the scene. The world's most intense construction site manager, wearing a turban and a scowl, ensuring that not a single minute is wasted. Even the Grand Viziers are assigned their own towers to build and pay for, turning the construction into a competitive sport among the elite. My tower is taller than yours takes on a very literal, expensive meaning. As the walls rise, The Byzantines in Constantinople can only watch in horror. They are close enough to see the dust clouds, yet powerless to stop it. Emperor Constantine sends ambassadors to Mehmed with gifts of food and polite questions, asking why he is building a fortress on Byzantine land. It is a diplomatic dance of desperate politeness. Mehmed receives the ambassadors, takes the gifts, and then offers a reply that is chilling in its clarity. The land on that side is mine, he says, effectively claiming that everything outside the city walls now belongs to the Ottomans. When the emperor sends a second group of envoys to protest, Mehmed does not offer tea. He has them arrested and executed. The diplomatic dance is over. The music has stopped. By late August 1452, the fortress is finished. It is a beast of white stone, gleaming against the blue water and the green hills. The throat cutter is open for business. The test comes quickly. In November, a Venetian ship captained by a man named Antonio Rizzo tries to run the blockade. He is a brave man, perhaps believing that the new fortress is all bark and no bite, or that the Ottoman gunners are unskilled. He ignores the command to lower his sails. From the battlements of RelaxingHistory, the order is given. The great cannons positioned near the water's edge roar to life. This moment marks a turning point in naval history. Until now, ships could usually sail past forts with relative safety. Cannons were inaccurate and slow, but Mehmed has invested in the best. A massive stone ball strikes Rizzo's ship. The vessel does not just get damaged, it is obliterated, shattered into driftwood in an instant. The crew is thrown into the freezing current. Rizzo is captured, and his fate is grim. He is impaled as a warning to all others. The message echoes across the Mediterranean. The Bosporus is closed. The artery is severed. Constantinople is now breathing through a straw. Let us soften the lens as winter approaches. The construction noise fades, replaced by the howling wind of the coming season. RelaxingHistory stands silent and imposing, a new permanent fixture on the landscape. The sheer aesthetic power of the fortress is undeniable. Even today, if you sit on its ramparts, the view is spectacularly beautiful. You can smell the salt spray and hear the call of seagulls, the same sounds that the Ottoman sentries heard as they paced these walls 500 years ago, blowing into their hands to keep warm. They watch the water with hawk-like intensity, their eyes tracking every sail, every ripple. Inside the city, the news of the fortress and the sinking of the Venetian ship falls like a hammer blow. The mood shifts from anxiety to a somber realization. The siege has effectively begun, even if the army has not yet arrived. The city is locked in. The psychological impact is heavier than the stone blocks of the fortress. It is the feeling of a door clicking shut and the key turning in the lock. Yet, life goes on. It must. The bakers bake, the priests pray, and the winter rains begin to fall, washing the dust from the new white towers of the throat cutter. The water of the Bosporus rushes past the stone walls, indifferent to the ambitions of men, flowing endlessly from the dark sea to the light, while the city waits for the spring and for the man who built the castle to come and knock on the door. The winter of 1452 descends upon the Balkans, wrapping the hills in a shroud of white mist and bitter frost, while the emperor in Constantinople shivers in his unheated palace, counting his dwindling coins. A very different kind of heat is building in the Ottoman capital of Edirne. We must travel now to the foundry, a place of fire, smoke, and sweating men, where the future of warfare is being poured into a mould of clay. Here, amidst the roaring furnaces, stands a figure who is neither Turk nor Greek, a man whose genius will ring the death knell of the Middle Ages. His name is Urban. History remembers him as Urban the Hungarian, though some scholars debate his exact origins. Was he truly Hungarian, or perhaps a German from the mining regions of Transylvania? It matters little to the molten bronze. What matters is his mind. Urban is a master founder, a mercenary of engineering who understands the dark alchemy of gunpowder and metal better than any man alive. There is a profound tragic irony to his presence here, a twist of fate that feels scripted by a cruel playwright. Just months ago, Urban had stood before Emperor Constantine the Fiend in Constantinople, offering to build these very weapons for the defence of the city. He named his price: a modest salary and funds for materials. The emperor, desperate but destitute, could not pay. He did not have the gold to feed his own soldiers, let alone fund a massive science project. Urban, a man who needed to eat, packed his tools and walked out of the city gates, straight into the court of the young sultan. When Urban arrived in Edirne, Mehmed did not ask if he could build a cannon. He asked a specific, terrifying question: can you cast a cannon capable of smashing the walls of Constantinople? Urban's reply was the stuff of legend. He looked the Sultan in the eye and said, "I can cast a cannon of bronze with the capacity of the stone you want. I have examined the walls of the city in great detail. I could shatter those walls, and even the walls of Babylon itself." Mehmed gave him everything he asked for: unlimited bronze, unlimited copper, and a salary 4 times what he had requested. The deal was struck. The foundries were lit. The creation of the basilic, the royal cannon, is a sensory experience of immense power. Imagine the heat. In the dead of winter, the foundry is a cavern of sweltering orange light. Hundreds of men work around the clock, feeding the furnaces with charcoal until they roar like trapped dragons. The air tastes of sulphur and metallic tang. In the centre of the floor lies a massive pit, where the mould for the great gun has been prepared with clay and linen. Molten metal, glowing a furious blinding white, flows through channels like liquid sun, hissing and popping as it fills the void. It takes days for the metal to cool, a slow creaking process as the bronze settles into its final terrifying shape. When the mould is finally broken away, what emerges is a monster. The cannon is 27 feet long. Its barrel is so thick a man cannot wrap his arms around it. It is designed to fire a stone ball weighing 1,200 pounds over half a ton of granite flying through the air. It is not just a weapon, it is an obelisk of destruction. In an age where most battles are still fought with swords and arrows, this object is as alien and shocking as a spaceship landing in a medieval village. It represents the triumph of chemistry over chivalry. Urban is not done. He must test his creation. In January 1453, outside the royal palace in Edirne, the gun is set up. The Sultan is there, watching with bated breath. Urban, perhaps showing a thoughtful consideration for public safety, or maybe just avoiding mass panic, sends town criers through the streets of Edirne a day before. They warn the citizens not to be afraid of the great noise that is coming, assuring them it is not the end of the world, merely the Sultan's new toy. When the fuse is lit, the explosion is said to have been heard for 10 miles. The ground shakes. The massive stone ball screams across the plain, burying itself 6 feet deep in the soft earth a mile away. Mehmed smiles. The walls of Babylon are in trouble, but building the beast is only half the challenge. Now they must move it. The distance from Edirne to Constantinople is about 140 miles. For a single horseman, it is a few days' ride. For a bronze tube weighing nearly 20 tons, it is an odyssey. This journey, the procession of the great cannon, is one of the most surreal images of the entire war. It is a slow grinding parade of industrial might, moving at the speed of a snail. Urban constructs a massive carriage, a wagon of oak and iron, simply to hold the gun. To pull it, 60 oxen are yoked together, their breath steaming in the cold air, their hooves churning the mud. Flanking the oxen are 200 men, marching alongside the carriage to keep it steady, ensuring the monster does not tip over and crush everything in its path. Ahead of them marches a team of carpenters and sappers, road builders. Their job is to level the hills, widen the paths, and reinforce the wooden bridges. The cannon is so heavy that normal bridges would snap like dry twigs under its weight. Close your eyes and listen to the sound of this procession. It is a low, rhythmic rumble that vibrates through the soles of your feet. The creak groan of the massive wooden wheels, taller than a man, the snorting of the oxen, the shouts of the drivers cracking their whips, not in cruelty, but in rhythm, keeping the 60 beasts moving as one. Step, pull, creak, step, pull, creak. They move roughly 2.5 miles a day. It is a hypnotic, agonizingly slow march. It takes them nearly 2 months to cover the distance. There is a touch of soft humour to be found in the logistics. Imagine being a villager in a small Thracian hamlet, waking up to see your entire road blocked by a bronze pipe the size of a church steeple escorted by an army of cows. You would likely just stand by your fence, holding your rake, wondering if you are still asleep. The sheer absurdity of the scale is hard to comprehend. It is said that Urban rode alongside his creations like a proud father, fussing over the axles, greasing the wheels with animal fat, treating this instrument of death with the tenderness of a nursemaid. There is a scholarly debate surrounding the fate of Urban himself. Some chronicles suggest that the cannon was flawed, that the immense pressure of the gunpowder eventually caused it to crack and explode during the siege, killing its creator instantly. A case of the inventor consumed by his invention. Other historians argue that Urban survived the siege, only to fade into obscurity, his work done. We do not know for sure. But in this moment, on the muddy road to Constantinople, he is at the height of his powers. He is the man who unlocked the thunder. As the procession draws closer to the city, in late March, the rumours reach Constantinople before the gun does. The defenders hear whispers of a monster that breathes fire, a dragon made of bronze. It is a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. The fear it inspires is primal. The ancient walls, which have stood for 1,000 years, suddenly feel very brittle. The people of the city look at the stone fortifications they trusted to keep them safe, and for the first time they wonder if stone is enough. Finally, the great train arrives. The oxen are unyoked, their flanks heaving with exhaustion. The cannon is positioned opposite the gate of St. Romanus, the weakest point in the land walls, where the ground rises slightly, giving the gunners a clear line of sight. It sits there in the mud, a dark, silent cylinder pointing at the heart of the Roman Empire. It is not yet fired. It simply waits. The birds perch on its cold metal rim, unaware of the violence sleeping inside. The spring flowers are beginning to bloom around its wheels. The juxtaposition of the pastoral landscape, the green grass, the blue sky, the grazing oxen, and this dark, brooding machine is stark. The stage is set. The actors are in place. The technology of the future has arrived at the doorstep of the past, and it has brought a heavy knock that no door can withstand. The waiting is over. It is the 2nd day of April, 1453, the Monday after Easter. The spring sky is a piercing, indifferent blue, but the horizon is no longer empty. If you were standing on the ramparts of the Charisius Gate, looking west, you would see the earth itself seemingly begin to move. It starts as a low haze of dust, rising like steam from the ground, blurring the line where the green fields meet the sky. Then come the banners, thousands of them, snapping in the wind, a forest of red and green silk emblazoned with crescents and stars. And then, the men. They pour over the hills, not like an army, but like a rising tide, a river of steel and wool that floods every valley and road leading to the city. The Ottoman host has arrived. The sheer scale of the gathering is difficult to comprehend, even for modern minds, accustomed to population statistics. For a medieval observer, it must have looked like the end of the world. Historians have spent centuries arguing over the exact numbers, with estimates in the old chronicles ranging from a modest 60,000 to a hysterical 400,000. Modern scholarship tends to settle on a more realistic, yet still terrifying figure, perhaps 80,000 fighting men, supported by thousands of camp followers, engineers, cooks, and servants. Against them, inside the walls, stands a force of barely 7,000. It is a ratio of more than 10 to 1. The camp that springs up outside the walls is not just a military bivouac, it is a mobile city, instantly larger and more alive than the ancient capital it besieges. Within hours, a sea of white tents mushrooms across the plain, stretching from the Sea of Marmara in the south to the Golden Horn in the north. It is a masterpiece of logistics. There are streets, market stalls, designated areas for prayer, and corrals for the horses. The smoke from thousands of campfires rises into the air, turning the sunset into a hazy, blood-orange bruise. At night, the view from the walls is chilling. The land outside is lit by so many fires that it looks like a mirror reflection of the starry sky, while the city inside is dark, conserving its oil and wax. We drift over this tent city, observing the diverse tapestry of the Sultan's army. It is a multi-ethnic empire on the march. There are the wild, irregular cavalry, the Akinji, looking for plunder and glory. There are the steady, heavy infantry from Anatolia and the Balkans. And then, closest to the Sultan's magnificent red and gold pavilion, there are the Janissaries. These are the elite, the shock troops of the empire, dressed in distinctive uniforms with tall white felt caps. They move with a discipline that unnerves the watchers on the walls. They do not shout or break ranks. They stand in perfect silence, arms crossed, waiting for a command. They are Christian sons of Muslim fathers, in a sense, recruited through the Devshirme system from Christian families, converted to Islam and raised to be fiercely loyal to the Sultan. To the defenders on the wall, seeing these men is a bitter irony. The faces looking up at them could be their cousins, their brothers, lost to the other side of history. Inside the city, the reaction is a mixture of terror and a strange, calm resignation. The emperor orders a census to be taken, a final count of every man capable of bearing arms. He entrusts this task to his loyal secretary, George Francis. The result is a secret so devastating that Constantine orders it never to be spoken aloud. Francis records it in his diary with a heavy heart. There are only 4,983 Greek men able to fight, supported by just under 2,000 foreigners, mostly Genoese and Venetians, fewer than 7,000 men to defend 14 miles of walls. If they were spread out evenly, there would be one soldier every few yards, a thin, fragile line of flesh against a tsunami of iron. Yet they take their positions. There is a moving simplicity to the defence. The Genoese commander, Giovanni Giustiniani, a man of immense charisma and skill, takes charge of the land walls. He brings with him 700 heavily armoured professionals, men who know the grim mathematics of Sarge warfare. They bring a touch of professional confidence to the nervous amateur militia. You can imagine a Genoese crossbowman showing a local baker how to properly span his weapon, sharing a dry joke about the food to break the tension. At least the Turks brought their own kitchens, he might say. The smell of their roasting lamb is better than anything we have in here. A small chuckle in the face of death is a powerful shield. The emperor himself takes the centre, the Mesoteichion, the section of the walls where the terrain dips into the Lycus River Valley. This is the lowest point, the most vulnerable spot, the place where the fighting will be fiercest. By choosing this position, Constantine is making a statement. He will not hide. He places his headquarters near the gate of St. Romanus, directly opposite where Mehmed has pitched his tent. The two kings are now neighbours, separated only by a few hundred yards of stone and air. They can almost feel each other's presence. As the sun sets on April the 5th, the encirclement is complete. The Ottoman fleet has moved into the Sea of Marmara, blocking the southern escape route. The army blocks the west. The fortress of Rumeli Hisar blocks the north. Constantinople is a cork in a bottle, and Mehmed is holding the neck. The noise of the Ottoman camp begins to settle into a low, rhythmic thrum, the sound of 80,000 men eating, talking, sharpening swords. Inside the city, the churches are full. The icons are paraded along the walls, the golden faces of saints staring out at the enemy fires. The Patriarch and the Catholic Cardinal, usually bitter rivals, now walk in the same processions. Fear is a great ecumenist. There is a moment of profound stillness just before the violence begins. It is the deep breath before the plunge. The wind dies down. The flags hang limp. On the walls, a young sentry grips his spear, his knuckles white, staring into the dark. He wonders if he will see the morning. He wonders if the stories of the saints are true. He wonders if the arrow that finds him will hurt, and then from the darkness of the Ottoman lines a single drum begins to beat. Boom, boom, boom. It is not a signal to attack, not yet. It is a heartbeat, the heartbeat of a new age, knocking on the door of the old. The siege has begun. The sun rises on the morning of April 6th, 1453, not with the gentle amber promise of spring, but with a harsh, revealing light that illuminates the vastness of the doom waiting outside. The birds, usually a chorus at this hour, are strangely absent, as if nature itself has held its breath or fled to safer branches. Inside the city, the liturgy has just finished in the churches. The smell of frankincense still clings to the clothes of the soldiers manning the battlements. They look out over the parapet, squinting against the morning glare, and they see the Ottoman gunners bustling around their machines like attendants serving a dark altar. The wooden mantelets, protective screens for the artillery crews, are pulled back. The matches are lit. The siege of Constantinople, the final act of the Roman drama, begins, not with a charge, but with a thunderclap. The first shot from the great Ottoman batteries is a sensory event that defies the medieval imagination. Until this moment, war has been a thing of shouting men, clashing metal, and the thwack of arrows. But this is the sound of the earth cracking open. When the basilic and its smaller cousins fire in unison, the noise is so immense it physically hurts the ears. It is a concussive wave that rattles the teeth in your skull and shakes the dust from the icons in the Hagia Sophia miles away. The chroniclers tell us that pregnant women in the city fainted from the shock and the ground trembled as if possessed by an earthquake. It is the great noise, a terrifying announcement that the rules of physics have changed. Watch the stone ball from the great cannon. It is not a blur. It is large enough to be seen with the naked eye. A black moon hurtling through the sky. It arcs high, singing a low, deadly hum as it cuts the air, before crashing into the ancient limestone of the Theodosian Walls. The impact is sickening. These walls were built to withstand battering rams and catapults, weapons that chip and crack, but the cannonball does not chip, it shatters. It pulverizes the stone into a cloud of white dust that billows up like a sudden fog, blinding the defenders and choking the air with the taste of pulverized history. When the dust clears, a section of the battlements is simply gone, replaced by a jagged, smoking gap. Yet there is a strange, agonizing rhythm to this destruction. The great cannon, for all its power, is a temperamental beast. It takes an eternity to reload. After each shot, the barrel is so hot that it glows. The crews must swarm over it, pouring buckets of olive oil and water onto the bronze to cool it down, rubbing it with grease, like athletes massaging a tired muscle. It is a slow, dangerous process. If they reload too quickly, the powder will ignite prematurely, killing them all. Because of this heat and the immense labour involved in hoisting the 1,200-pound stone ball into the muzzle, the basilic can only be fired 7 times a day. This creates a peculiar psychological torture for the defenders. They survive the first shot, they cough in the dust, they look at the damage, and then they have to weigh it. They can see the Ottomans prepping the gun again. They have an hour, maybe 2, to dread the next impact. It is a slow-motion execution. The anticipation becomes almost worse than the explosion itself. You can imagine a sentry on the wall, staring at the distant cannon, muttering to the man next to him, "I think they're stuck again. Maybe they ran out of oil." A moment of dark, hopeful humour, quickly extinguished when the next roar splits the sky. But here, amidst the crumbling stone, we see the resilience of the human spirit and the genius of Giovanni Giustiniani. He realizes quickly that rigid stone cannot stop these balls. Stone is brittle, it breaks, so he orders a change in tactics. He tells the defenders to stop trying to rebuild the stone walls perfectly. Instead, they use the debris, the broken rocks, the dust, and mix it with earth, timber, and brushwood. They create soft, absorbent stockades behind the breaches. This is a brilliant improvisation. When a cannonball hits a stone wall, the wall shatters. When it hits a mound of soft earth and wood, the ball buries itself. The force is absorbed, dissipated into the dirt. The mud catches the cannonball like a catcher's mitt. The defenders even hang bales of wool, tapestries, and leather sheets over the walls to cushion the blows. It is a surreal sight, the majestic fortifications of Rome draped in old rugs and mattresses, looking like a laundry day gone wrong. But it works. The high-tech artillery of the future is being slowed down by the low-tech mud of the past. Historians often debate how much damage the walls actually sustained in these first few days. Some Ottoman chronicles claim the walls were sieved like a net immediately, while Byzantine sources insist the damage was manageable. The truth lies in the cycle of the day. By day, the Ottoman cannons smash the walls, creating breaches that look fatal. The Sultan watches from his tent, pleased, thinking the city lies open. But then the sun sets. The firing stops, for cannons cannot be aimed in the dark. And then, the city wakes up. As the moon rises over the Golden Horn, a different army emerges, an army of repairers. It is not just the soldiers. It is everyone. Old men, nuns, monks, noble women whose hands have never held anything heavier than a silver goblet. They all come to the walls. They carry baskets of earth, logs and stones. They work in the cool darkness, whispering to one another, passing loads hand to hand. The rhythmic thud, thud, thud of the cannons is replaced by the scrape, scrape, scrape of shovels and the soft chanting of prayers. There is a profound intimacy in this nightly labour. The social barriers of the empire dissolve in the dust. The emperor himself is often there, riding from breach to breach, encouraging the workers. "Well done, my children," he says. "You are building the salvation of your souls." By dawn, when the Ottoman gunners rub the sleep from their eyes and look at the walls, they are stunned. The breaches are closed. The stockades are rebuilt. The city has healed itself overnight. It is a demoralizing magic trick. Mehmed is reported to have said in frustration that the walls seemed to grow back like the heads of a hydra. But the skirmishes are not limited to long-range duels. Occasionally, the Ottoman infantry, eager to test the defences, rushes the moat. They run forward with ladders and hooks, shouting the name of God. The defenders on the walls rain down arrows, rocks, and Greek fire, that ancient liquid flame that burns even on water, we catch a glimpse of a Genoese crossbowman, calm and professional, winding his winch. Thwack! A bolt flies, a target falls. He reloads. To him, this is a job. To the man beside him, a Greek monk throwing stones, it is an apocalypse. These early days of the siege settle into a grim routine. The first tremors of spring are not just the shaking of the ground, but the shaking of the world order. The cherry blossoms are blooming in the orchards inside the city, their delicate pink petals drifting down to land on the blood-stained mud of the ramparts. It is a contrast that defines the entire experience, the incredible beauty of the setting and the incredible ugliness of the violence. As the first week of the siege draws to a close, the defenders are tired, their ears ringing from the constant explosions, their clothes grey with stone dust. But they are still there. The walls are battered, pockmarked and patched with mud, but they still stand. The initial shock of the great noise has faded into a dull, throbbing headache. They have learned that the cannons are terrifying, yes, but they are not instant death. They can be resisted. They can be tricked with earth and wool. And so, as the twilight of mid-April settles over the city, a strange, fragile hope begins to take root. Perhaps the walls will hold. Perhaps the Virgin Mary really is protecting them. They do not know that the Sultan is merely clearing his throat, testing his range, and preparing for the true weight of his power to be unleashed. For now, they wipe the dust from their eyes, share a piece of hard bread in the shadow of a repaired tower, and watch the sun go down, grateful for one more night of silence before the thunder returns. The spring has come, but it is a spring of iron, and the harvest will be bitter. We remain at the land walls, but we must zoom in closer, pressing our faces against the wounded skin of the city. To understand why this battle is the funeral of the Middle Ages, we must look at the anatomy of the victim. The Theodosian walls are not just grey slabs of rock, they are a beautiful striped sandwich of history. If you look closely at a surviving section today, you see alternating bands, 5 layers of white limestone blocks, then a thick band of red Roman bricks, then limestone again. This was not just for aesthetics. The red brick layers acted as shock absorbers, preventing cracks from spreading through the entire structure during earthquakes. For 1,000 years, this design saved Constantinople from nature. But Urban, the Hungarian engineer, has figured out that it cannot save the city from him. He develops a firing technique that is terrifyingly scientific. It is a method of demolition, not just bombardment. He sets up his batteries in clusters. He uses 2 smaller cannons to hit a specific point on the wall, say the base of a tower, aiming to hit the left side, then the right. Bang, bang. These shots weaken the structure, shaking the mortar loose. Then, once the target is softened, he signals the great basilic. The monster roars, sending its 1,200-pound ball smashing into the centre of the weakened section. The result is catastrophic. The tower does not just crumble, it collapses vertically, sliding down into the moat in a cascade of dust and rubble. It is a triangulation of death, a calculated dismantling of the Roman legacy, stone by stone. There is a scholarly debate about just how effective this artillery was in the long run. Some military historians argue that the cannons were actually inefficient. They cracked the walls, yes, but the rubble they created actually made a better defensive rampart than the vertical walls because soldiers could stand on top of the debris pile and fight downhill. A vertical wall can be knocked over. A pile of rocks is already on the ground. You cannot knock down a hill. In a strange irony, by destroying the perfect Roman engineering, the Ottomans are inadvertently creating a gritty, chaotic terrain that favours the desperate defenders. Let us step into the chaos of a breach. It is April 18th, shortly after sunset. The bombardment has been relentless for 12 days. Near the Lycus Valley, the walls have been pulverised into a steep, jagged slope of earth and stone. The Ottoman commanders decide the time is right for the first major assault. They do not send the elite janissaries yet. They send the heavy infantry and the irregulars, the bashibazouks. The attack begins with a roar of voices that rivals the cannons. Thousands of men surge forward in the twilight, scrambling up the loose earth of the collapsed wall. They carry torches, scimitars, and maces. To the defenders at the top of the breach, looking down, it must look like the mouth of hell has opened. The air is thick with smoke, and the smell of unwashed bodies, sweat, and fear. But here, we see the medal certificate of the defence. Giovanni Giustiniani is everywhere. He is a shining figure in polished plate armour, a stark contrast to the ragged, dusty militia. He fights with a cold, professional efficiency. He has positioned his best men, the Genoese crossbowmen and German mercenaries, at the top of the debris slope. As the Ottoman troops scramble up, slipping on the loose rocks, they are met with a hail of bolts. The fighting is visceral and intimate. In a siege, you do not kill a faceless enemy at a distance. You look him in the eyes as you push a pike into his chest. It is a brawl. The defenders use everything they have. They throw rocks. They pour boiling oil. They use Greek fire, though by this late stage in history, the secret recipe for the true flamethrower-like Greek fire has been lost, and they are likely using a simpler pitch-based incendiary. Still, it is terrifying. Men engulfed in flames tumble back down the slope, knocking over their comrades like bowling pins. There is a moment of dark absurdity in the melee. The Ottoman soldiers, eager for glory, sometimes crowd so tightly into the breach that they cannot swing their weapons. They are packed shoulder to shoulder, a wall of flesh pressing against a wall of stone. A defender might find himself simply pushing a ladder over, watching it fall in slow motion, with 5 men clinging to it, cursing all the way down. It is a deadly slapstick. For 4 hours the battle rages in the dark. The noise is a cacophony of clashing steel, screams, and the constant ringing of church bells in the city behind them, calling for divine aid. And then, as quickly as it began, the tide recedes. The Ottoman commanders, realizing they cannot break the line tonight, sound the retreat. The attackers flow back down the slope and into the darkness. The silence that follows is heavy. The defenders lean on their spears, gasping for air, their faces streaked with soot and sweat. They look at each other with wide eyes. They have held. The invincible army has been turned back. Emperor Constantine, who has been fighting in the thick of it, goes among them, praising their courage. If we can stop them once, the logic goes, we can stop them forever. But the stone tells a different story. If you walk along the inside of the walls the next morning, the damage is undeniable. The structural integrity of the city is failing. The towers are leaning. The cracks are widening. You might see a monk trying to patch a 10-foot hole with a mixture of mud and straw, a pitiful bandage on a mortal wound. He works frantically, muttering prayers, while a few yards away a group of Genoese soldiers sit cleaning their weapons, looking at the cracks with the critical eye of engineers. They know the truth. They know that stone does not heal. The stone against fire phase of the siege has revealed a grim reality. The defenders can win the fights, but they are losing the war of physics. Every day, the cannons eat a little more of the wall. Every night, the repairs are a little flimsier. The city is being slowly digested. As we pull back from the dust-choked Lycus Valley, we see the sun glinting off the Golden Horn to the north. The water is calm, a stark contrast to the battered land walls. The defenders look toward the sea with a desperate hope. They are waiting for ships. They are waiting for the Pope. They are waiting for a miracle from the west. They do not know that the next blow will not come from the cannons, but from the very water they trust to protect their flank. The land war is a stalemate of attrition, but the Sultan has a new trick up his sleeve, one that involves wood, grease, and a defiance of nature itself. The stone has held against the fire, but can it hold against the impossible? Turn your eyes now from the dusty, battered land walls to the shimmering, cool expanse of the sea. Specifically, look to the north, to the entrance of the Golden Horn. Here lies the city's primary lifeline and its most confident defence, the Great Chain. It is a marvel of medieval security, a massive floating barrier consisting of huge wooden logs joined by iron links the size of a man's forearm. It stretches across the mouth of the harbour, from the Tower of Eugenius on the city side to the Castle of Galata on the northern shore. The chain is a psychological blanket for the people of Constantinople. As long as the chain holds, the Ottoman navy cannot enter the harbour. As long as the harbour is safe, the northern sea walls, which are much thinner and weaker than the land walls, do not need to be heavily manned. The chain allows the defenders to ignore an entire side of the triangle. It sits there in the water, heavy and rusted, bobbing gently with the tide. A silent iron guardian saying, "You shall not pass." But on the morning of April 20th, the eyes of the city turn not to the chain, but to the open sea of Marmara beyond it. A cry goes up from the watchtowers. Sails. 4 ships are spotted on the horizon, their canvas bellied out by a strong southerly wind. It is the miracle they have been praying for. 3 of the ships are Genoese galleys, tall, heavy merchantmen hired by the Pope. The 4th is an imperial transport commanded by a brave Greek captain named Flantanellas, carrying vital grain and weapons from Sicily. The scene that unfolds is one of the most dramatic naval spectacles in history. The Ottoman fleet, commanded by the Admiral Süleyman Baltoglu, spots the newcomers. Baltoglu has over 100 ships, triremes, biremes, and lighter fustas. He orders them to intercept. The 4 Christian ships are sailing straight into a swarm of wasps. From the walls of Constantinople, thousands of citizens gather to watch. It is like a gladiatorial arena, but the floor is water and the stakes are survival. The emperor rides to the sea walls to watch. On the opposite shore, the Sultan rides down to the beach with his staff, confident that his massive fleet will swallow these 4 intruders whole. But naval warfare in 1453 is not just about numbers, it is about height. The Genoese ships are round ships, tall, heavy, ocean-going vessels designed to survive Atlantic storms. The Ottoman ships are low-slung galleys designed for speed in calm waters. When they collide, the difference becomes immediately apparent. The Ottoman sailors try to board, but they are hacking at the wooden hulls far below the decks of the Genoese ships. They are fighting uphill. From the high castles of their ships, the Genoese and Byzantine sailors rain down a hell of arrows, stones, and Greek fire. It is a slaughter. The Ottoman galleys crowd around the 4 tall ships like a pack of wolves trying to bring down a mammoth, but they only get trampled. The wind, howling from the south, drives the Christian ships forward, smashing through the line of lighter Turkish vessels. Wood splinters with the sound of crack and bone. Oars snap. Men are thrown into the churning water. There is a moment of pure cinematic rage from the Sultan. Historical sources describe Mehmed watching this disaster from the shore, his face turning a terrifying shade of purple. He is so consumed by fury that he spurs his horse into the sea. Imagine the image, the most powerful ruler in the Islamic world, shouting curses, his horse splashing chest deep into the waves, waving his sword as if he could physically cut the Genoese ships from a mile away. It is a moment of human vulnerability, the tantrums of a young king who is used to getting his way, suddenly faced with the stubborn reality of superior naval architecture. The wind holds. The 4 ships crash through the blockade. They reach the safety of the Golden Horn. The great chain is lowered for just a moment to let them in, then raised again. With a triumphant clanking of iron, the ships glide into the harbour, their decks stained with blood, but their cargoes intact. A roar of jubilation goes up from the city walls that drowns out the Ottoman cannons. For one night, the city believes. See, they say to one another, hugging in the streets, the West has not forgotten us, God has not forgotten us. But the aftermath in the Ottoman camp is grim. The Sultan summons Admiral Baltaoglu. The scene is tense. Baltaoglu is a brave man who lost an eye in the battle. But Mehmed is unforgiving. He strips the admiral of his rank and his wealth. Some chroniclers claim Mehmed was so angry he personally beat the admiral with a heavy stick, while the poor man's sailors watched in horrified silence. Historians debate whether this physical beating actually happened, or if it was an embellishment to show the Sultan's ferocity, but the message was clear: failure is not an option. Yet this victory for the city carries the seeds of its own destruction. Mehmed stares at the Golden Horn, he stares at the chain. He realizes now that he cannot break it. He cannot sail through it. He cannot go under it. The naval blockade is a failure as long as that chain exists. The logical mind would accept the stalemate. But Mehmed does not have a logical mind. He has a visionary one. He retreats to his tent, refusing to speak to anyone. He sits in the dark, listening to the lapping of the waves. He looks at the map. If he cannot go through the water, he must go around it. But around the water is land, steep forested hills behind the Genoese colony of Galata. Hills covered in brush and rocks. You cannot sail a ship over a hill. It is a physics impossibility. It is a joke. Or is it? A slow, audacious smile likely spreads across his face in the darkness. He remembers a story, perhaps from history books, about Venetians moving ships over land in Italy years ago. But never on this scale. Never with an entire fleet. It is madness. It would require thousands of men, thousands of trees, and gallons of grease. It would be the greatest engineering trick in the history of warfare. He calls his engineers. "I want my ships in the Golden Horn," he says, his voice quiet and dangerous, "and since the water is closed, we will take the land." The engineers likely looked at each other, terrified to point out that ships do not have wheels. But in the court of Mehmed II, you do not point out problems, you find solutions. So, while the city celebrates its naval victory, drinking the wine brought by the Genoese ships and singing hymns of thanksgiving, a new sound begins to echo in the hills north of the harbour. Chop, chop, chop. It is the sound of axes, thousands of them. The Sultan is not defeated. He is merely changing the rules of the game. The great chain has done its job too well. It has forced the enemy to attempt the impossible. And as the people of Constantinople sleep, dreaming of rescue, the trees on the hill are falling, laying the path for a nightmare that will come sliding down the slope on grease logs. The irony is bitter. The very strength of their defence has inspired the brilliance of their doom. We move now to the dark wooded hills behind the Genoese colony of Galata, just north of the Golden Horn. It is the weekend of April Taknim 1st and 22nd, 1453. If you were a shepherd tending your flock on these slopes, you would witness a scene so surreal that you might question your own sanity. You would see the impossible happening. You would see ships sailing not on water, but on grass. The plan conceived in the Sultan's tent has become a reality of sweat, wood, and grease. The Ottoman engineers have cleared a path roughly 1 mile long, rising steep uphill from the Bosporus shore, cresting the ridge, and then plunging down into the valley of the springs to reach the Golden Horn. It is a road of pain, To make the surface slick enough for heavy vessels, they have laid down a continuous track of wooden planks and logs. And then comes the grease. Every available lubricant in the Ottoman camp has been requisitioned. Olive oil, sheep fat, rendered lard, barrels of it are poured onto the wood until the road glistens like ice in the torchlight. The smell is thick and heavy, a mixture of a kitchen and a shipyard. The sheer logistical audacity is breathtaking. They are not moving small rowboats, they are moving 70 naval vessels, some of them fully armed by rams. The operation begins under the cover of a massive artillery barrage. Mehmed orders his cannons on the land walls to fire continuously, day and night, creating a curtain of noise to drown out the sounds of the forest. He also positions mortar ships near the chain to distract the Byzantine sailors. While the world looks at the smoke, the real magic is happening in the trees. The ships are hauled out of the Bosporus and mounted on cradles, wooden frames with wheels or runners. Then the teams of oxen and men are hitched up. The command is given. The whips crack and the ships begin to move. Imagine the sight. A warship with its masts standing tall and its sails furled, gliding silently through a forest of cypress and pine. It looks like a hallucination. The leaves of the trees brush against the hulls, where barnacles usually cling. Birds, startled from their nests, fly up, not from branches but from the rigging of a galley passing by. It is a collision of two worlds, the maritime and the terrestrial. To keep the rhythm of the haulers, and perhaps to mask the creaking of the wood, the Sultan orders bands of musicians to play. Drums beat, trumpets blare, and fifes whistle a marching tune. The sailors, sitting on the decks of their land-bound ships, actually unfurl their sails when the wind is favourable, as if trying to catch a breeze between the hills to help the oxen. It is a moment of whimsical absurdity in the midst of a brutal war. One can imagine a confused captain standing on the poop deck, instinctively checking the wind direction and shouting, "Hard to port! Mind the oak tree!" It is the kind of detail that makes history feel like a fable. Scholars have long debated the exact route taken. Some argue it was a short, steep climb right behind the Galata Tower. Others suggest a longer, more gradual loop through the valleys. Regardless of the geography, the timeline is agreed upon. It happened terrifyingly fast. In a single night and morning, the impossible was achieved. As dawn breaks on Sunday, April the 22nd, the citizens of Constantinople wake up to a nightmare. They look out at the Golden Horn. The harbour, they believed, was sealed tight by the great chain. They rub their eyes. There, in the water, behind the chain, are Ottoman ships. First one, then 10, then 30. They are bobbing gently in the morning light, their crews cheering and beating drums. The psychological impact is devastating. It is as if the enemy has teleported. The safe side of the city is safe no longer. The Golden Horn, which had been a sanctuary for the Byzantine fleet and a secure flank for the walls, is now a second front. The defenders rush to the sea walls, staring in horror. The prophecy of doom suddenly feels very real. How can you fight an enemy who can turn land into water? The presence of these ships changes the geometry of the siege instantly. Until now, the few thousand defenders only had to worry about the land walls. Now, they must split their forces. Men are pulled from the battered breaches of the Theodosian Walls and sent to patrol the sea walls along the harbour. The thin blue line of defence is stretched until it is almost transparent. In a desperate response, the Venetian and Genoese captains in the harbour plot a counterattack. They plan a night raid to burn the Ottoman ships before they can fully establish themselves. It is a bold plan, but it is doomed by delay and treachery. Historians still argue about who betrayed the secret. Was it a Genoese merchant trying to curry favour with the Sultan? A spy? By the time the Christian ships launched their attack On the night of April the 28th, the Ottomans are waiting. The Turkish cannons, now positioned along the shore of the Golden Horn, open fire. The attack is a disaster. The Christian ships are sunk or forced to retreat. The sailors who swim ashore are captured. The next morning, in a brutal display of psychological warfare, the Sultan orders these prisoners to be executed in full view of the city walls. In retaliation, the defenders drag their own Ottoman prisoners to the ramparts and execute them in view of the Sultan. The war has descended into a grim tit-for-tat spectacle of cruelty. The chivalry of the early days is gone. The gloves are off. Yet, even in this moment of despair, there is a strange beauty to the scene. The Golden Horn, usually a busy commercial port, has become a deadly chessboard. The two fleets stare at each other across the water, separated by only a few hundred yards. At night, the reflections of the watchfires dance on the black water, mingling with the reflection of the moon. The call to prayer from the Ottoman ships mixes with the evening vespers from the city churches. It is a duet of faiths sung over a body of water that has become a graveyard. The ships sailing over the hills is the turning point of morale. It proves to the defenders that there is no limit to Mehmed's determination. If he needs to move mountains, or move ships over mountains, he will. The walls of the mind are crumbling just as fast as the walls of stone. The people of the city begin to look at the ground beneath their feet with suspicion. If the enemy can come from the sky with cannons, and from the hills with ships, where will they come from next? The answer lies beneath the very stones they walk on. The war is about to move from the air and the sea to the dark, claustrophobic depths of the earth. The Sultan has brought miners. And while the ships float ominously in the harbour, a quieter, scratchier sound begins to echo deep underground. The city is being hollowed out. The roots of Rome are being cut, not with a sword, but with a pickaxe, in the suffocating darkness where no light ever shines. Tread softly now. We must leave the fresh air and the blinding sunlight of the surface world entirely. We are descending into the dark. If the siege above is a clash of thunder and fire, the war down here is a struggle of silence and breath. We are deep beneath the foundations of the Theodosian Walls, in the suffocating, narrow world of the sappers. Mehmed, frustrated by the resilience of the walls and the stalemate at the harbour, plays another card from his diverse deck of imperial assets. He summons the miners of Novo Brdo. These men are Serbians, subjects of the Ottoman vassal despot, and they are widely considered the finest miners in Europe. They have spent their lives chasing veins of silver and gold through the hard rock of the Balkans. Now they are asked to dig for a different prize, the roots of the city. Their goal is simple and terrifying: to dig tunnels starting from far behind the Ottoman lines, burrowing under the moat and the outer walls, and reaching the foundations of the main towers. Once there, they will pack the cavity with gunpowder or simply burn the wooden props holding up the tunnel roof. The earth will collapse, and the great tower above, its foundation suddenly turned to void, will crumble into the earth. It is an assassination of architecture. Inside the city, the ground feels solid, but paranoia is spreading like a virus. The defenders know the miners are out there. They just don't know where. Imagine the psychological terror of standing on a wall, knowing that at any second, the stone beneath your feet could simply yawn open and swallow you whole. Every vibration, every dropped cup that rattles on a table causes heads to snap around. Is that them? Are they here? Enter Johannes Grant. If Urban is the dark wizard of the Ottomans, Grant is the paladin of the Byzantines. He is a mercenary engineer, a man of mysterious origins. Historians have debated his lineage for centuries. Was he a Scot named John Grant? A German named Johannes Grant? or perhaps a mix of both. Regardless of his passport, he is a genius of underground warfare. He is the city's ear. Grant takes charge of the defence against this invisible enemy. He cannot see the tunnels, so he must hear them. He places bowls of water and piles of dried peas on drumheads at intervals along the ground near the walls. It is a primitive but effective seismograph. He walks the perimeter at night, watching the water. If the surface ripples, or if the peas dance, he knows. Digging. When a tunnel is located, Grant does not panic. He orders a countermine. The defenders dig their own tunnel, aiming to intersect the Ottoman shaft. This leads to the most nightmarish combat of the entire siege. War in the sunlight is horrific enough, but war in a tunnel is the stuff of madness. The shafts are barely wide enough for a man to crawl on his hands and knees. There is no room to swing a sword. There is no light, save for the flickering of a dying torch or the spark of flint. The air is foul, thick with dust, and the carbon dioxide of panting men. When the two tunnels meet, when the pickaxe of a Serbian miner breaks through into the void of a Byzantine tunnel, the violence is instant and feral. Men stab at each other with daggers, strangle each other with dirty hands, or simply bludgeon each other with their mining tools. There is a primal intimacy to it. You are dying in the arms of your killer, buried alive in a grave you both dug. Grant is ruthless in his methods. Sometimes he does not send men, he sends elements. When a breach is made, he orders his troops to pump vinegar fumes or smoke from burning sulphur into the enemy tunnel. It is chemical warfare in the dark. The enemy miners, coughing and blinded, are forced to retreat or suffocate. In other instances, Grant orders the tunnels to be flooded, drowning the rats in their holes. There is a dark, grim humour to be found in Grant's professional detachment. He treats these subterranean invasions not as military crises, but as pest control issues. He is reported to be calm, almost bored, as he points to a spot of dirt and says, "Dig here. We will catch them in 3 hours." He is a man who plays three-dimensional chess while covered in mud. On May 16th, the Ottomans try to tunnel under the Blackenay quarter. Grant finds them. On May 21st, they try again near the Calagaria gate. Grant finds them. On May 23rd, they try a massive double tunnel. Grant finds them, captures the miners, and, in a moment of grim interrogation that we will not linger on, forces them to reveal the locations of all other shafts before the tunnel is collapsed on top of them. By the last week of May, the Ottoman miners are broken. They have dug through rock and clay, only to be met every time by the devilish anticipation of the German Scot. They refuse to go back in. The underground war is won by the city. The walls will not fall from below, but the victory is exhausting. The defenders are sleepless. They are fighting on the ramparts by day, putting out fires by evening, and crawling through mud tunnels by night. They are being stretched to the absolute limit of human endurance, and while Grant has secured the earth, the sky above is turning against them. As we emerge from the damp tunnels blinking in the twilight of late May, we notice something wrong with the moon. It is May 24th. The moon should be full, a bright lantern watching over the city, but as it rises it is not white, it is dark. A shadow creeps across its face, turning it a sickly, blood-red copper colour. A lunar eclipse. To the modern mind, this is an astronomical event, a celestial alignment of spheres. To the medieval mind, soaked in prophecy and fear, it is a telegram from God. And the news is bad. An ancient prophecy stated that Constantinople would never fall while the moon was waxing, growing. But now the moon is dying. It is bleeding. Panic ripples through the streets. People run to the Hagia Sophia, weeping. The icons are brought out for a procession to calm the city. But as they carry the holiest icon of the Virgin Mary through the streets, it slips from its frame and falls into the mud. A gasp of horror goes up. When they try to pick it up, it seems impossibly heavy, like lead. Then the weather breaks. A violent thunderstorm erupts, followed by a thick, suffocating fog, a rare weather phenomenon for May in this region. The city is wrapped in a wet grey blanket. The unseasonal fog is interpreted as the Holy Spirit departing the city. The Shekinah, the divine presence, is leaving the building. The atmosphere in the city shifts from desperate hope to a fatalistic melancholy. The psychological walls are collapsing. The emperor tries to rally them, but how do you argue with the moon? How do you debate with a falling icon? The omens in the moonlit sky have done what the cannons could not. They have broken the city's heart. Yet in the Ottoman camp, the same moon is seen differently. To the Turks, the crescent is a symbol of Islam, a moon that is changing, revealing a red destiny. Perhaps it is a sign that the old light is fading to make way for the new. Mehmed looks at the red moon and smiles. He does not need tunnels anymore. He does not need tricks. The heavens are aligning. The fruit is ripe. He senses that the spirit of the defenders is cracking. It is time for the final push. We leave the section with the image of Johannes Grant wiping his muddy hands on a rag, looking up at the red moon. He has won the battle of the earth, but he knows he cannot fight the stars. The tunnels are silent, but the silence is heavy, pregnant with the violence that is yet to come. The city waits, shivering in the fog, for the sun to rise on its final days. We linger in the heavy, suffocating atmosphere of the final week of May. The tunnelling war has ceased, leaving the city in a fragile silence, but it is the silence of a sick room where the patient has stopped breathing. The omens we glimpsed at the end of the tunnelling campaign, the red moon, the unseasonal fog, were not singular events. They were the opening notes of a funeral dirge that now plays continuously in the minds of the people. The air itself feels thick, charged with a static electricity that makes the hair on one's arms stand up. The line between history and mythology is blurring. The citizens of Constantinople no longer feel they are living in a political capital, but in the final chapter of a biblical revelation. It is the night of May 25th, or perhaps the 26th. The chronicles drift in the fog of memory, when the final, most terrifying sign appears. The fog that has choked the city for days begins to lift. The people, desperate for any sign of hope, look toward the great church, the Hagia Sophia. What they see stops their hearts. Hovering around the base of the massive dome, and then rising up from it, is a strange flickering light. It is not the warm glow of torches or the sharp flash of lightning. It is a soft, fiery luminosity, described by witnesses as a flame that seemed to engulf the dome but did not burn it. To the modern scientist, this was likely St. Elmo's fire, a weather phenomenon caused by the intense electrical charge in the atmosphere following the storms. But to the medieval Roman, staring up from the muddy streets with tear-stained cheeks, it is something far more final. They watch in horror as the light seems to gather itself, rising from the dome into the night sky, drifting upward until it vanishes into the heavens. The interpretation is instantaneous and unanimous. The Shekinah, the Holy Spirit, the divine protection that has guarded the city since the days of Constantine the Great, has packed its bags. God has left the building. The psychological collapse caused by this sight is total. We can see the scenes of devastation not on the walls, but in the homes. Mothers clutch their children, rocking back and forth, whispering that the angels have abandoned them. Strong men, veterans of a dozen battles, weep openly in the streets. The prophecy that the city would fall when the moon gives a sign is now joined by the physical evidence of the city's soul departing. It is a mass panic of the quiet, paralyzed sort. There is no rioting, only a deep, crushing resignation. Interestingly, across the walls, in the Ottoman camp, the same light is seen, but through a very different lens. The Sultan's advisors look at the strange glow over the Hagia Sophia and see a falling star, a light descending to the earth. "Look," they tell Mehmed, "the true light of faith is descending upon the city to prepare it for you." Where the Byzantines see abandonment, the Ottomans see welcome. It is a profound example of how belief shapes reality. The same photons hitting the same retinas create despair in one heart and destiny in another. In this twilight of reality, the Emperor Constantine X walks a lonely path. He does not have the luxury of collapsing. He must be the father to a family that knows it is dying. He visits the monasteries, where monks are burying the icons to protect them from the coming looting. He visits the soldiers on the walls, who are now so exhausted they are sleeping where they stand, using their shields as pillows. He tells them that the light was just a trick of the weather, that the moon is just a rock in the sky. He lies to them with love. He tries to be the rationality in a world gone mad. But when he turns away, his own shoulders slump. He is a man fighting, not just an army, but a narrative. There is a scholarly debate about the role of these omens. Did they truly decide the outcome? Militarily, no. The walls were already broken, the defenders outnumbered. The city would likely have fallen even on a sunny day, but historically, these events mattered because they broke the will to resist. They provided the emotional permission for the end. A soldier who believes he is fighting for a doomed city fights differently than one who believes he is protected by God. The omens turned the defense from a military operation into a sacrificial rite. The atmosphere in the city during these final days is almost dreamlike. The shops are closed. Money has no value. What good is a gold coin if you are going to be dead by Tuesday? People share their food freely. Old feuds are forgotten. A neighbour who stole your chickens 10 years ago comes to ask for forgiveness. In the face of extinction, the petty grievances of life evaporate, leaving only the raw, naked humanity. The city becomes a community of souls, waiting for the ferryman. As the strange light fades and the dark normality of night returns, a heavy realization settles over everyone. The waiting is almost over. The first tremors are gone. The stone against fire phase is done. Now, there is only the end. The Sultan, emboldened by the signs, is preparing his final strike. He calls a council of war. The time for games is finished. The omens have voted. The city is ripe. And yet, in the very centre of this supernatural dread, there is one last act of very human politics to be played out. Before the sword falls, words must be spoken. The script of history demands a final conversation between the two protagonists. The omens have set the stage, the lighting has been adjusted by the heavens, and now the two kings must step forward for their final exchange. It will not be a conversation about ghosts or lights, but about honour, blood, and the price of a city that refuses to die. The cannons fall silent. For the first time in weeks, the dust is allowed to settle on the battered stones of the land walls. It is a silence that feels louder than the noise, jarring the defenders who have become accustomed to the rhythm of destruction. From the Ottoman lines, a solitary figure rides out. He carries no weapon, only a white flag snapping in the breeze. He is Isfendiaroglu Ismail, a high-ranking noble, and a man chosen for his smooth tongue and noble bearing. He rides not to kill the emperor, but to offer him a key to the handcuffs. The final diplomatic dance has begun. It is May 26th. Mehmed, despite his overwhelming advantage, is a calculator of risks. He knows that a final assault will be costly. He knows his own troops are growing weary, and that rumours of a Hungarian relief army are whispering through the camp. He prefers a city intact to a city destroyed. And so, he makes his offer, the generous offer of a conqueror who holds a knife to the throat of his victim. Ismail is received in the Blashanai palace. The contrast is striking. The Ottoman envoy is well fed, dressed in pristine silk, smelling of rosewater and confidence. The Byzantine court he enters is a shadow play. The tapestries are threadbare, the courtiers are gaunt, their faces grey with fatigue and stone dust. Constantine stands to receive him, wearing armour that is dented and scratched. He looks less like a monarch and more like a weary shift supervisor at a factory that is burning down. The terms are read aloud. They are surprisingly rational. If Constantine surrenders the city immediately, he will be allowed to leave with his life, his courtiers, and his movable wealth. He will be given the governorship of the Peloponnese, the Morea, where he can rule as a minor prince in peace. The citizens of Constantinople will be spared. There will be no looting, no slavery, no killing. They can keep their homes and their churches. All they have to do is open the gates. If he refuses, the alternative is the strict Islamic law of war. If a city resists and is taken by force, the soldiers are granted 3 days of unrestricted looting. The population will be enslaved. The emperor will be executed. It is a moment of profound philosophical weight. A modern pragmatist would take the deal. Why die for a pile of broken rocks? Why condemn your people to slavery for the sake of pride? Save the culture, save the lives, give up the geography. It is the sensible choice. Mehmed is counting on Constantine being a sensible man. Constantine calls a council. He looks at his commanders. He looks at the patriarch. He looks at the Genoese mercenary Giustiniani. We do not know the exact words spoken in that room, but we can imagine the heavy silence. They all know the reality. The walls are finished. The food is gone. The West is not coming. The offer on the table is the only lifeboat left on the Titanic, but Constantine the Mephoim is not a modern pragmatist. He is a Roman. To him, Constantinople is not just real estate, it is an idea. It is the sacred container of the faith, the legacy of Augustus and Constantine the Great. To hand it over voluntarily is to commit a spiritual suicide that is far worse than physical death. To be the emperor who gave away Rome, that is a burden no soul could carry. His reply to Mehmed is one of the most dignified and heartbreaking speeches in history. It is not a shout of defiance, it is a whisper of absolute moral clarity. He tells the envoy, "As to surrendering the city to you, it is not my right to do so, nor is it the right of any individual who lives in it. For it is our common resolve, and we shall all die of our own free will, without any regard for our lives." Read those words again. It is not my right. He is saying that the city belongs to history, to God, and to the future. He is merely the custodian. He does not own the deed. He cannot sell the house. It is a rejection of the very concept of surrender. He effectively tells Mehmed, "You can take my life and you can take my walls, but you cannot take my consent." There is a subtle scholarly debate about whether Constantine truly consulted a council, or if this was his own private decision made in the quiet of his heart. Most historians agree that while he spoke to his advisors, the resolve was his own. He was relieving them of the guilt. By refusing to surrender, he was taking the entire weight of the coming massacre onto his own shoulders. He was choosing to be the sacrificial lamb, so that history would remember the Byzantines as martyrs, not cowards. When Ismail rides back to the Ottoman camp and delivers the answer, Mehmed does not rage. He nods. He likely expected this. He respects Constantine, in the way a hunter respects a wolf that turns to face the hounds, But the time for talk is over. The refusal to surrender has signed the death warrant of thousands, but it has saved the honour of the empire. Mehmed immediately shifts gears. The calculator is put away. The sword is drawn. He rides through his camp, whipping his men into a frenzy. He promises them everything. "The city is rich," he shouts. "The treasures of the ages are inside. I give you the people, the gold, the silver, the silk. All I want for myself is the buildings." It is a dark promise, appealing to the basest greed of the unpaid irregulars, but it works. A roar goes up from the camp that shakes the birds from the trees. Destruction, plunder, gold. Inside the city, the mood changes from anxiety to a strange, calm certainty. The ambiguity is gone. They are going to die. There is a terrifying freedom in that realization. You no longer have to worry about saving money for next winter. You no longer have to worry about political maneuvering. You only have to worry about how you will stand when the end comes. Constantine walks the walls again. He speaks to the Venetians and Genoese, thanking them. "You are not foreigners today," he tells them. "You are brothers of the city." He reconciles with his political enemies. It is the behaviour of a man settling his affairs before a long journey. The night of May 26th fades into the 27th. The bombardments resume, but now they are sporadic, almost lazy. The Ottomans are saving their powder. They are resting their muscles. The psychological pressure of the refusal hangs heavy over the Golden Horn. The defenders look at the Ottoman ships, the Ottoman tents, the Ottoman cannons, and they realize that the next time the sun rises, it will bring the storm. There is a poignant detail often missed. Amidst this preparation for death, life stubbornly persists. In the gardens of the city, the vegetables still need watering, the chickens still need feeding. We can imagine a woman tending her small patch of onions near the walls, while 50 feet away, men are sharpening swords. It is the juxtaposition of the eternal and the ephemeral. The onions will outlast the empire. As the sun sets on the 27th, the Sultan orders a day of rest and prayer for the 28th, followed by the assault on the 29th. Silence falls again, but this time it is not the silence of negotiation. It is the silence of a held breath before a scream. The letters have been written, the goodbyes have been said. The emperor has refused to sell his soul, and now he must pay for it with his blood. The stage is cleared. The final act is about to begin. The sun sets on May 28th, 1453, and the curtain falls on the final day of the Roman Empire. The city does not sleep tonight. Instead, it seems to hold its breath, suspended in an amber twilight of candles and oil lamps. The silence of the guns is heavy, amplified by the sounds of the human heart, the murmur of prayer, the shuffle of feet, the soft weeping of families saying goodbye behind closed shutters. But all streams of humanity eventually flow to one place. We follow them now, drifting like smoke through the darkened streets, past the shuttered shops and the silent forums, toward the great spiritual magnet of the East, the Church of the Holy Wisdom, Hagia Sophia. For weeks, this massive cathedral, the largest building in the known world, has been a place of tension and division. The Orthodox faithful, angry at the emperor's union with the Catholic Church, have avoided it, calling it a temple of heretics. But tonight, death has dissolved dogma. As we glide through the monumental bronze doors, the imperial gate, the sight that greets us is one of the most moving tableaux in human history. The vast interior, cavernous enough to hold a weather system of its own, is packed. Every square inch of the marble floor is covered with people. There are no Greeks or Latins here tonight. There are no Unionists or anti-Unionists. There are only frightened souls seeking comfort in the shadow of the dome. Genoese sailors in heavy armour stand shoulder to shoulder with Greek nuns in black habits. Venetian merchants hold candles alongside poor dock workers. The schism of 1054, a theological divorce that split Christendom for 4 centuries, is healed in an instant by the common denominator of mortality. The smoke of the incense rises in thick blue clouds, catching the light of thousands of lamps, creating a haze that makes the golden mosaics on the ceiling shimmer as if the saints themselves are weeping. The sound is overwhelming, not a noise of panic, but a deep, rhythmic ocean of chanting, Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy. It rises from 10,000 throats, echoing off the porphyry columns and the green marble of Thessaly, reverberating in the dome like the heartbeat of God. It is a sound that vibrates in the chest, a physical sensation of unity. If you were standing there, pressed against a pillar, you would feel the collective sorrow and the collective hope of an entire civilization merging into one voice. In the centre of this sea of humanity stands Constantine Desmin. He has removed his helmet, but he still wears his armour, the metal gleaming dully in the candlelight. He looks older than his 49 years. The weight of the crown, historians often debate whether he wore the actual imperial diadem or a simpler soldier's circlet this night, presses visibly on him. He moves through the crowd not as a distant autocrat, but as a father walking among his children for the last time. He stops to speak to soldiers, to priests, to old women. He asks for their prayers. Then a moment occurs that pierces the heart of the chronicle. The emperor, the autocrat of the Romans, the vicegerent of God on earth, bows low. He turns to the congregation, to his commanders, his servants, the foreign mercenaries, and he asks for their forgiveness. He asks pardon for any offence he may have caused, any harsh word spoken, any decision that brought them pain. It is an act of supreme humility. The crowd responds with a wail of emotion that momentarily drowns out the chanting. Men and women fall to their knees, crying out, "We forgive you, die for us, and we will die for you." It is the ultimate social contract, signed not in ink, but in tears. He partakes of the Holy Communion, the bread and the wine, the body and the blood. It is the last meal of the condemned, but it is also the fuel for the martyr. As he stands there, the light from the candelabra catching the tears in his beard, he is no longer just a politician or a general. He has become an icon. He is the personification of the city itself, ancient, noble, and resigned to its fate. Scholars often discuss the last speech of Constantine, recorded by the historian Francis. Some argue the text we have is a later invention, too polished, too rhetorical, filled with classical allusions to Hannibal and Scipio that a tired soldier likely wouldn't have made, but the essence of the moment is undoubtedly real. Whether he gave a grand oration or simply whispered his resolve, the message was clear. You are the descendants of heroes, do not fear the enemy's numbers. Your ancestors defeated the Persians and the Arabs. Trust in God, and if we must die, let us die, so that history will say we did not dishonour our race. Soft humour is hard to find in such a scene, yet there is a touch of human absurdity in the sheer scale of the gathering. We might imagine a small grumpy deacon trying to maintain order in the apse, shushing a group of Venetian sailors who are loudly debating the quality of the sacramental wine, completely missing the gravity of the moment, or a child playing with the wax dripping from a candle, fascinated by the shapes it makes on the marble floor, oblivious to the fact that the world is ending. These tiny sparks of normalcy make the tragedy feel real, anchoring the operatic emotion in the dirt and dust of human life. As the liturgy concludes, the emperor turns to leave. The crowd parts for him, a red sea of sorrow. He walks slowly toward the great doors, his spurs clicking on the stones. He stops one last time to look back at the altar, at the giant mosaic of Christ Pantocrator in the dome. It is a gaze of interrogation. Have I done enough? The eyes of the mosaic stare back, silent and inscrutable. He exits the church and mounts his horse, a white Arabian mare. His loyal friends, Francis, Theophilus, Don Francisco of Toledo, mount up beside him. They do not ride to the palace to sleep. They ride to the walls, specifically to the gate of St. Romanus, the weakest point, the place where the hammer will fall. The transition from the warm, incense-filled womb of the Hagia Sophia to the cold, dark air of the streets is jarring. The city outside is quiet, but it is a different kind of silence. It is the silence of a predator crouching in the grass. The wind is picked up, rustling the cypress trees in the cemeteries. The moon is hardened behind thick clouds. Constantine rides through the deserted streets of his capital. He passes the hippodrome, where the ghosts of chariot races seem to watch him from the empty stands. He passes the ruined aqueduct of Valens. He is touring a graveyard of empires. When he reaches the walls, he climbs to the highest tower. He looks out into the darkness. Below him, the Ottoman camp is a galaxy of lights. Thousands of torches and bonfires illuminate the enemy lines. The sound of chanting, La ilaha illa Allah, drifts up on the wind, a rhythmic, terrifying lullaby. The janissaries are preparing. The cannons are being loaded. The ladders are being readied. Constantine stands there for a long time. He knows that when the sun rises, the Roman Empire will likely end. He knows that he will likely be dead. But there is no fear left in him, only a crystalline clarity. He has made his peace with God and man. He draws his sword, checking the edge in the darkness, then slides it back into the scabbard with a sharp click. He turns to Giustiniani, who is checking the lock on the gate. "My brother," Constantine says softly, "the morning is near." Back in the Hagia Sophia, the candles are burning low. The priests continue to chant, their voices growing hoarse. The people lie on the floor, waiting. The great golden dome hangs above them, a suspended heaven that seems to be the only thing keeping the sky from falling. The city waits. The emperor waits. And in the east, invisible behind the heavy clouds, the sun begins its long, slow climb toward a dawn that will set the world on fire. The transition from the waiting to the dying happens not with the sunrise, but with the sound. It is 1:30 in the morning, May 29th, 1453. The world is pitch black, the moon hidden behind a heavy curtain of storm clouds. Inside the city, the only light comes from the dying embers of watchfires and the flickering candles of the praying women in the churches. On the walls, the soldiers are peering into the gloom, straining their ears against the wind. And then it begins. It does not start with a scream, but with music. From the darkness of the Ottoman lines, a terrifying rhythm erupts. It is the Mehter, the Ottoman military band, the oldest marching band tradition in the world. Thousands of drums, from small kettle drums to massive bass drums, begin to beat in unison. Boom, boom, crack. Boom, boom, crack. They are joined by the high, piercing wail of the zurnas, shrill oboes that sound like screaming eagles, and the clash of brass cymbals. It is a wall of noise designed to induce panic, a sonic weapon that vibrates in the chest cavities of the defenders. As the music reaches a fever pitch, a roar goes up from 80,000 throats, a single shout of Allah, Allah, and that rolls over the walls like a physical wave. And then the first wave crashes against the stone. These are the Bashibazouks, the irregulars. They are a motley collection of mercenaries, adventurers, and peasants from every corner of the known world. Slavs, Turks, Greeks, Hungarians, Germans. They are unarmoured, armed with whatever they could bring: rusted scimitars, slings, axes, even clubs. They are the expendable ones. Mehmed sends them first not to take the walls, but to die on them. Their job is to exhaust the defenders, to blunt their swords and empty their quivers. The scene at the stockades, the makeshift barriers of earthen barrels replacing the fallen walls, is a nightmare of confusion. In the dark, it is hard to tell friend from foe. The defenders fire their crossbows and culverins, primitive handguns, blindly into the mass of bodies swarming up the debris. There is a grim industrial quality to the slaughter. The Genoese soldiers, professionals to the core, work in teams. One shoots, one reloads. The noise is deafening. The crack of gunpowder, the thwack of bolts hitting flesh, the screams of men falling into the moat. There is a tragic historical irony here that often goes unmentioned. Among the Bashibazouks are thousands of Christians, renegades or conscripts from vassal states. It is quite possible that in the chaos of the night, a Greek defender on the wall drives his spear into the chest of a Greek attacker from the plains. It is a civil war of faith fought in the dark. For 2 hours, the irregulars throw themselves at the city. They are driven forward by Ottoman officers with whips, trapped between the swords of the Romans and the lashes of their own masters. But the defence holds. Giustiniani is a whirlwind, moving from breach to breach, shouting orders, his armour gleaming in the flashes of cannon fire. The defenders are energised by their success. "They are failing!" they shout to one another. "The Virgin protects us!" But Mehmed is watching. He sees the irregulars faltering, their bodies filling the moat, creating a gruesome bridge of flesh for the next wave. He signals the retreat. The survivors of the first wave drag themselves back into the darkness. The defenders cheer. They lean on their bloody spears, panting, wiping sweat from their eyes. They reach for water skins. They think they have bought an hour of rest. They are wrong. Before the dust has even settled, the drums begin again. A new rhythm, faster, heavier. The second wave emerges. These are the Anatolian infantry, regular soldiers, disciplined, wearing chainmail and carrying shields. They do not scream like the irregulars. They march. They advance methodically toward the broken section of the wall near the Lycus Valley. And now the great cannon, the basilic, speaks again. The Ottoman gunners have managed to reload it in the dark. Boom. The explosion lights up the night sky like a stroke of lightning. The ball smashes into the stockade, sending a shower of earth, timber and men flying into the air. Before the dust clears, the Anatolians charge. This fight is different. These men know how to fight. They bring ladders and hooks. They climb over the piles of their own dead comrades to reach the parapets. The combat becomes hand-to-hand, a crushing, claustrophobic brawl. Swords ring against shields. Men grapple in the mud, slipping on the entrails of the fallen. Emperor Constantine is in the thick of it. He has discarded the imperial purple cloak that might make him a target. He fights as a soldier, his sword wet with blood. We catch a glimpse of him, a middle-aged man with grey in his beard, parrying a blow from a Turkish scimitar, shouting encouragement to a young Venetian boy terrified by the onslaught. "You are a lion!" he yells, slapping the boy's shoulder. "Stand fast!" There is a moment of pure sensory overload. The bells of the city are tolling wildly now, every church ringing the alarm, the klaxon of the Middle Ages. Combine this with the Ottoman drums, the zurnas, the roar of the cannons, and the screaming of thousands. It is the great noise that the prophecies spoke of. It is a sound so loud that contemporary chroniclers said it seemed as if the sky itself had been torn asunder. It is the sound of an era dying. And yet, miraculously, the line holds again. The Anatolians, despite their armour and discipline, cannot break the Genoese shield wall. Giustiniani's men are immovable objects. They fight With the precision of machines, after hours of brutal combat, the Anatolian wave breaks. They begin to pull back, exhausted, leaving another layer of dead in the moat. It is now nearly dawn. The sky to the east is turning a bruised purple-grey. The defenders are gasping for air. Their arms are heavy as lead. Their swords are notched. They have fought off two armies. Surely, they think, the Sultan has no more to give. Surely he will wait for the sun. But then a silence falls over the battlefield. A silence more terrifying than the noise. The Ottoman drums stop. The shouting stops. The retreat of the Anatolians leaves a vacuum in the air. Out of the mist, moving with an eerie, ghost-like discipline, comes the third wave. They do not run, they walk. They wear distinct white caps. They carry composite bows and heavy halberds. They are fresh. They are the Janissaries, the Sultan's personal guard, the finest soldiers in the world. Mehmed himself rides with them as far as the moat, shouting, "The city is yours! The city is yours!" He points his mace toward the broken walls. The Janissaries attack with a terrifying, silent efficiency. They do not waste breath screaming. They advance in perfect lockstep. When they reach the stockade, they do not just climb, they flow. They are fresh athletes fighting exhausted men who have been hacking at bodies for 4 hours. The impact is devastating. The defenders, who had just begun to relax, are slammed backward. A Janissary scimitar is faster than a tired arm. The Genoese and Greeks are pushed back, step by bloody step. The great noise returns, but now it is the sound of desperation. The church bells are ringing faster, more frantically, a panic-stricken heartbeat. In the midst of this chaos, we see a moment of soft, grim humour, or perhaps madness. A defender, perhaps a cook, pressed into service, throws a rock at a fully armoured Janissary. It bounces off the soldier's helmet with a hollow plink. The Janissary pauses, looks at the rock, looks at the cook, and then continues his advance with a shake of his head as if annoyed by a mosquito. It is the futility of the amateur against the professional. The pressure is unbearable. The stockade is swarming with white caps. The air is thick with the smell of sulphur, sweat, and iron. Constantine and Giustiniani are fighting back to back, a two-man island in a sea of enemies. They are holding the line by sheer force of will. But fate is a cruel writer. It is not the overwhelming numbers that will break the city. It is not the cannons. It is a small, stupid accident, a detail so minor it feels like a plot hole in a novel. As the sun begins to crest the horizon, casting a pale light on the carnage, a group of Italian soldiers notices something happening near the Kerkaporta gate, a small postern gate used for sorties. It has been left unlocked, or perhaps damaged. The crescendo has reached its peak. The symphony of violence is at its loudest. The drums are thundering. The bells are screaming. The cannons are roaring. And through the smoke and the noise, the first few Janissaries slip through the crack in the wall, unnoticed, like a trickle of water that precedes the bursting of the dam. The great noise is about to be replaced by a gasp of horror. The night is over. The end has arrived. History does not always turn on the hinges of great golden doors. Sometimes it turns on a rusty, forgotten latch in the dark. We stand now at the northern section of the land walls, near the palace of the Blashenai. Here lies a small, insignificant postern gate known as the Kerkaporta. It is half buried in the earth, a service entrance for the lower courts, largely unused for centuries. In the confusion of the repairs, or perhaps due to the exhaustion of a careless sentry, this gate has been left unlocked. It is not a wide gash in the fortification like the breach in the Lycus Valley. It is a needle eye, and through it the thread of doom is about to be pulled. While the main battle rages a mile away, a small group of about 50 janissaries prowling the perimeter like wolves testing a fence, discovers the mistake. They cannot believe their luck. They push the door. It creaks open. There is no guard, no trap. Just a dark corridor leading into the courtyard behind the defenders. They slip inside, silent as smoke. They climb the stairs to the top of the wall and raise an Ottoman standard. At the exact same moment, in the heat of the main battle at the St. Romanus Gate, the second catastrophe strikes, this one not of luck, but of iron. Giovanni Giustiniani, the backbone of the defence, the man who has seemed immortal for 53 days, is struck. Historical accounts differ on the weapons. Some say an arrow pierced his gauntlet, others say a crossbow bolt struck his neck, and a few claim it was a lead shot from a culverin that shattered his chest plate. Whatever the projectile, the effect is instantaneous. The invincible Genoese commander crumples. He is bleeding heavily. The pain is unbearable. For the first time, the professional mask slips, revealing a frightened, wounded man. He asks his bodyguards to carry him away from the wall, to his ship in the harbour, to a surgeon. Emperor Constantine sees this movement. He rushes to Giustiniani's side. The conversation that follows is the final tragic dialogue of the Roman Empire. "My brother," Constantine pleads, gripping the wounded man's arm, "do not leave us. If you leave, the city is lost. Your wound is not fatal. Stay, and we will win." It is a desperate moment. The emperor is begging not just for a soldier, but for the morale of his entire army. But Giustiniani is in shock. The pain has broken his will. He looks at the emperor with glazed eyes and whispers, or so the legend goes, "I am going to God. Open the gate for me." He demands to be taken out through the inner wall. His bodyguards obey. They open the gate in the inner stockade to carry their commander to safety. This is the fatal error. The defenders on the walls see the gate open. They see their commander, the giant in the shining armour, being carried away. They do not know he is wounded. They think he is fleeing. A murmur runs through the line like an electric current. Giustiniani is leaving. The Genoese are running. The panic is contagious. It moves faster than the plague. The discipline that held the line for 6 hours evaporates in 6 seconds. And then a shout comes from the north. "The city is taken! The city is taken!" The defenders look back and see the Ottoman flag flying from the tower near the Kerkeporta. They are surrounded. The enemy is behind them. The illusion of safety shatters. The collapse is total. It is not a retreat. It is a rout. The Genoese mercenaries, seeing their leader gone, abandon their posts to run for the ships. The Greek militia, seeing the professionals run, throw down their spears. The golden apple has been bitten. Mehmed, watching from the moat, sees the confusion. He sees the gate in the stockade left open by Giustiniani's retreating guards. He stands up in his stirrups, waves his sword, and screams the final command, "In, in! The city is yours." The janissaries pour through the open stockade gate like a flood of white water. There is no one left to stop them. They slash through the few remaining defenders who are too slow to run. The great noise changes frequency again. It is no longer the roar of battle, but the high-pitched scream of slaughter. In the centre of this swirling apocalypse stands Constantine Ismail. He is alone now. His army is dissolving around him. He watches the flood of janissaries pouring into his city. He looks toward the harbour, where the ships are unfurling their sails to escape. He could join them. There is still time. A fast horse could get him to a boat. He could live out his days in Italy, a tragic exile, writing letters and drinking wine. But that is not the ending he has written for himself. He looks at his few remaining loyal companions, Theophilus, his cousin, and Don Francisco, a Spanish knight. Theophilus shouts, "I would rather die than live," and charges into the oncoming wave of Turks. Constantine makes his choice. He unclasps his purple imperial cloak, the symbol of his rank, the target for any ransom seeker, and lets it fall into the mud. He is no longer the emperor. He is simply a Roman soldier defending his home. He draws his sword. It is said he shouted, "The city has fallen, and I am still alive." A final paradoxical complaint against fate. He raises his sword and charges, not away from the enemy, but directly into the thickest knot of janissaries. It is a suicide charge, yes, but it is also an act of supreme defiance. He disappears into the sea of white caps and flashing scimitars. We lose sight of him in the crush. There is no cinematic duel with the Sultan. There is only the hacking of blades, the grunt of effort, and then the fall. The last Roman emperor dies as an anonymous soldier, buried under the weight of the empire he tried to save. The Kerker Porta, that tiny stupid door, remains open, swinging gently in the wind, a tombstone for a civilization. Through it, the Middle Ages exit, and the modern era enters, sword in hand. The walls are breached. The legend is over. The reality of the sack has begun. The sun climbs high over the Golden Horn, indifferent to the history it is illuminating. It is the afternoon of May 29th. The great noise has finally ceased, replaced by a strange, chaotic murmuring that fills the alleyways. The city is no longer a battlefield. It is a prize. Ottoman soldiers move through the streets, staring up at the marble columns and the golden mosaics with wide eyes. For many of these men, who grew up in the rugged plains of Anatolia or the mountains of the Balkans, Constantinople is not a city. It is a myth made of stone. They touch the walls of the palaces as if checking to see if they are real. The customary 3 days of looting promised by the Sultan has begun. It is a time of tragedy, of course. Wealth is seized, captives are taken, and the accumulated treasures of 1,000 years are scattered. Yet historians note a fascinating deviation here. Mehmed, entering the city later that day, is visibly pained by the destruction. He rides through the streets and sees the broken statues, the roofless palaces, the emptiness. He is not a vandal. He is a curator who has just acquired a damaged masterpiece. He is reported to have quoted a melancholy Persian couplet under his breath as he rode. The spider weaves the curtains in the palace of the Caesars. The owl calls the watchers in the towers of Afrasiab. It is the lament of a poet king, realizing that even his victory is temporary in the eyes of time. He stops the looting early. After just 1 day, some sources say less, he orders the soldiers back to their camps. He does not want to rule a ruin. He wants a capital. Mehmed rides straight to the Hagia Sophia. This is the moment the entire siege has been building toward. He dismounts at the great bronze doors. He stoops down, picks up a handful of dust from the ground, and sprinkles it over his turban. It is a gesture of profound humility, a reminder to himself and his men that he is dust, and to dust he shall return, no matter how great his conquest. He enters the church. Inside, the scene is one of terrified silence. The citizens who had fled there are huddled in the corners. The Sultan walks to the center of the vast space, under the dome, that seems to float on light. He looks up. He is awestruck. He orders that the marble floor be broken to find the omphalos, the center of the world, but he stops any soldier who tries to hack at the mosaics. He summons a waiting imam. He climbs the pulpit, and there, under the gaze of the seraphim, the first Islamic call to prayer rings out in the Hagia Sophia. Allahu Akbar. In that cry, the Byzantine Empire officially exhales its last breath. The cathedral becomes a mosque. The cross is replaced by the crescent. But, and here is the nuance often missed, the building remains. Mehmed does not destroy it. He adopts it. He becomes its protector. He keeps the name, adapting it slightly to Hagia Sophia. He sees himself now not just as the Sultan of the Turks, but as the Kaiser-i-Rum, the Caesar of Rome. He has not killed the Roman Empire. In his mind, he has saved it by taking it over. What of the last emperor? The search for Constantine's body is frantic. Mehmed offers a large reward. Eventually, a body is found near the St. Romanus Gate, identifiable only by the purple socks embroidered with imperial eagles. The head is removed and displayed briefly to prove the emperor is dead, a grim necessity of statecraft to prevent impostors from rising up. But then, according to some traditions, Mehmed allows him to be buried with honour. However, a beautiful scholarly debate and a lasting legend persists. Many Greeks refuse to believe the body was truly his. A myth was born that Constantine did not die, but was turned into marble by an angel at the moment the Turks entered. The Marble King sleeps in a cave near the Golden Gate, waiting for the angel to wake him so he can reclaim his city. It is a story told by grandmothers to children for centuries, a way of keeping hope alive in the dark. But history is less romantic. The man died as he lived, fighting for his home. The fallout of this day ripples across the world. The fall of Constantinople is the bookend of the Middle Ages. The shock in Europe is profound. The Pope weeps, kings tremble. But from this disaster comes a seed of light. The scholars, artists, and philosophers who fled the city in the weeks before and after the siege travel west, they go to Florence, to Venice, to Rome. They carry in their trunks the precious manuscripts of Plato, Aristotle, and the ancient Greek poets, texts that the West had largely forgotten or only knew in translation. These refugees become the teachers of Italy. They pour the wisdom of the ancient world into the thirsty mind of Europe. The fall of the East sparks the rise of the West. The Renaissance is fueled, in part, by the ashes of Constantinople. It is a beautiful, painful transfer of energy. The dying mother passes her knowledge to her estranged daughter before she fades away. And the city does not die. Mehmed repopulates it vigorously. He invites Jews, Christians, and Muslims from all over his empire to move there. He builds the Grand Bazaar. He repairs the aqueducts. He transforms the crumbling, depopulated ruin into Istanbul, a bustling, multicultural imperial capital that will rule the Mediterranean for 4 centuries. The tea houses fill again. The ships return to the Golden Horn. The cats, who, let's be honest, are the true owners of the city, continue to sun themselves on the warm stones, indifferent to whether the man feeding them wears a turban or a crown. As we pull our camera back for the final time, rising high above the Bosporus, we see the city not as a tragedy, but as a palimpsest, a manuscript written over again and again. The Roman layer is still there, beneath the Ottoman layer, which is beneath the modern Turkish layer. The walls of Theodosius still stand today, crumbling and covered in ivy, watching the oil tankers pass by. The year 1453 was a wound in time, a violent tear, but wounds heal. They leave scars, and scars are just history written on the skin. The sun sets now on Istanbul, casting the same golden light it cast on Constantinople. The names change, the prayers change, the flags change, but the water still flows from the Black Sea to the Marmara. The seagulls still cry out over the fishing boats, and the city on the 7 hills remains, eternal, beautiful, and complicated, the bridge between the worlds, the diamond between 2 sapphires, the queen of cities. We've walked a long road together tonight, you and I, from the dusty plains of Thrace to the marble floors of the Hagia Sophia. We have watched empires rise and fall, heard the thunder of cannons, and felt the silence of the aftermath. But now, the history books are closing. The dates and the names are drifting away like smoke in the wind. Let the image of the city fade. Let the noise of the siege soften until it is nothing more than the rhythmic sound of your own breathing. The walls are no longer stone. They are just shadows in the distance. The sea is calm, dark, and still. There is no more conflict here, only the deep velvet peace of the night. You are safe. The past cannot touch you, it can only teach you. The heroes have laid down their swords. The kings are sleeping in their tombs. The world is quiet. Let your mind drift on the current of the Golden Horn, floating gently toward the open sea of sleep. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to worry about. The story is told, the night is yours, sweet dreams.